Good morning, everyone, and welcome to The Source, WURD 900 AM, 96.1 FM, your source for information in our community. I'm Renee Chenault-Fatah on this Monday morning, guest hosting Mondays in April for my very good friend Barbara Grant, who is working on a political campaign for the month of April into May. I hope you all had a great weekend. I had such a terrific weekend. I got to tell you, usually my weekends are quiet. I spend time working on the documentary, getting caught up with my daughter, and all those sorts of things. This weekend, from start to finish, was really busy, which is why my voice is a little raspy. So bear with me today. I'm happy to be here with you, but the voice is a little push. Let me tell you just a quick few words about this past weekend. On Saturday, I was with hundreds of powerful, inspirational women. It was part of the WDAS Women of Excellence Luncheon. And I got to tell you, to be in the company of these amazing sisters, from Eve to Janice Armstrong to Keira Bradford Gray to Amber Hikes to Facetta Green, it was just an incredible experience. And I had my mom there with me. I had my youngest daughter, my two best girlfriends, who, I mean, my God, we go back way, way, way back. It was just really an amazing few hours. And also, in addition to the honorees that I mentioned, Mimi Brown got a special honor, and she talked about being in radio for some 40 years, and she talked about Louise Williams Bishop being such an inspiration to her. So it was an incredible, incredible afternoon. And I had to leave early. I ended up missing the music, Brian Knight and Pastor Marvin Sapp, because I had to get to Baltimore for my 40th year college reunion. And it's so funny because, you know, I struggled with, okay, do I say I'm the class of 79 or do I say it's a 40th year reunion? Which one sounds less old? And I realized they both sounded old, so there's no way around that. But it was just wonderful to be back on the campus with my classmates, and it was important to me to be there. There are two issues that matter to me, one around health disparities, the other around making sure that there's access to education. Education has been transformational in my life, and in the coming Mondays, I certainly want to talk about that. But so it was important for me to get back there for the reunion. And then yesterday, I attended an Alzheimer's fundraiser. It was sponsored by the Delaware Valley Alzheimer's Association. They have a new executive director. Her name is Christina Francel, and she was kind enough to invite me to sit at her table. And what a treat it was to be there. And the event was hosted by Fox's 29's Bill Anderson. Cody, if you're listening, you would be proud of your son. He did a terrific job. But the whole afternoon, it was called Wine, Women, and Shoes. So how can that not be a great time? But it was to raise funds, but also to honor people in our area who have given so much in the fight against Alzheimer's. And of course, that sort of brings me to why I'm with you on Mondays. Let me just say one more thing about the event yesterday. I was there with the Associate Director of Diversity Inclusion of the Alzheimer's Association of Delaware Valley, and that's Frederica Waugh. And Frederica is going to be in studio with us today. When I set out to do this project a year and a half ago, and I would go into the community, or I would go to the University of Pennsylvania, their Penn Memory Center. Anytime I told them that this is what I was doing, the first words out of their mouth was, well, if you're really serious about this, you need to talk to Frederica Waugh. And it's true. Frederica knows everybody in this arena. She has the information. The Alzheimer's Association is such an important organization in terms of bringing awareness to this subject. So I'm just very thankful that, one, she's my friend. In fact, we found out the first time we got together and had breakfast, we share a birthday. So, we're sisters in a lot of ways. But anyway, Freddie is here today, and she's going to be talking a little bit later on. But like I said, let me tell you a little bit about what brought me here, and maybe even back up a few minutes or just to talk a little bit about me, just in terms of my background. I was an anchor and legal reporter and health reporter at NBC 10 for about 25 years. In 2015, I left the station, and after about a year off, decided that, I wanted to tell a story that mattered. You know, storytelling was in my blood, whether it was, you know, lawyers. I'd practiced law for 3 years, and I think I had said this last week. You may not think about it in this way, but lawyers really are storytellers. You know, whether you're, you know, telling your narrative to a jury or to the partner you're working for, or to, you know, I clerked for a judge, so, you know, we had to brief him on cases. So anyway, narrative has always been a part of my life. And of course, when I left the law and decided I wanted to be a journalist, I moved around for about 5 years in 4 different markets doing television, and then came here to Philadelphia. At the time that I came here, the station was WCAU. It was a CBS station, and then about 4 or 5 years after that, it became the NBC station. The station you know today is NBC 10. So anyway, my whole adult life has been spent as a storyteller, and I knew that I wanted to tell a story. And the story that struck me and struck a chord, and is the story that I've been committed to telling over the past year and a half through doing a documentary, is around Alzheimer's and other dementias in communities of color. I discovered that if you are African American, Hispanic, or Native American, you are twice as likely as a white person to get this disease. If you are a woman, you are more likely to have Alzheimer's. If you're a woman, you are more likely to be a caregiver for someone who has Alzheimer's or another form of dementia. Right now, 5.5 million Americans, and that number every time I look grows, because, and it makes sense it grows because one of the risk factors, of course, is getting older. So as our population ages, the numbers are growing. 5.5 million Americans right now have this disease. And I call it a disease because it's so interesting. Before we went on the air, Frederica and my wonderful director-producer, new friend, Kayla D, we were all talking, and I think we all sort of thought at one point that this was just a part of getting older. It's not. Alzheimer's is a disease. It's the most common form of dementia. And this is where it gets a little confusing, because I hear people say, well, you know, she has dementia, but she doesn't have Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is a form of dementia, and you hear about it a lot because it's the most common form of dementia. But there are, oh my gosh, there are so many forms of dementia. Think of dementia as like a kind of brain disorder that has symptoms of memory loss, personality change, problems with reasoning and thinking, but there are different dementias. You probably heard of Lewy body dementia. That's what the famous comedian and actor Robin Williams had. There's frontal temporal dementia, which tends to strike people in their 40s and 50s and causes personality changes, tends to be one of the first symptoms you notice. Vascular dementia, which we hear a lot about, connected to stroke. As a caller brought up importantly last week, there's dementia brought on by chronic alcoholism. Well, over the course of the next 3 hours, I want you to call in with any questions you might have. I'm not a doctor. I didn't play one on TV. I'm not playing one on radio. But the beauty of doing this work is that I do have access to people who do have the information, who are doctors and researchers. So call in with your questions. I'm going to give you the number in a little bit, but we're still going to hold off on questions. But when it does come time for you to call in, any questions you have about either the disease, symptoms, questions around caregivers, because that's such an important part of this story, you know, we want to be taking your calls on that. Late last week, I was in Baltimore as part of doing the research and actually filming for the documentary, and I was at Johns Hopkins Medical School interviewing Dr. Marilyn Albert as part of, like I said, part of my documentary. Now, Dr. Albert is the executive director of Johns Hopkins Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. There are these research centers scattered around the country. Philadelphia is blessed to have one. It's at the University of Pennsylvania. But I was doing the filming at Johns Hopkins Center, and Dr. Albert, in addition to running the center, she's also the director of cognitive neuroscience in the Department of Neurology at Hopkins. Well, anyway, as you can see, she has the credentials. This is a woman who has spent her entire professional career, 30-some years, researching Alzheimer's. And she's the first to acknowledge that, having been in the trenches this long, how frustrating it is that we still do not have treatments, really effective treatments past the early stages for the disease. And there certainly right now aren't any cures. It's a disease that always ends in death, but she made the point, and this is where the silver lining is, and this is why information is so important and awareness is so important. She made the point that strides have been made and that there is information out there and that we have to make sure that it gets in the hands of people who need it. Dr. Albert's research is around Alzheimer's in middle age. And I know that sounds strange because we think of Alzheimer's as a disease that affects people as they're in their 60s, 70s, 80s. Her research has focused on looking at people in middle age because symptoms, by the time symptoms appear in this disease, it is well along. The idea is to study people in middle age because that is before symptoms appear, and yet there are things going on in our brain which can, if not treated or addressed, lead 10, 20, 30 years down the road to Alzheimer's. And the idea is if you get treatment early, it slows the progression of this disease. It buys you more time to lead a quality life because there are drugs out there that in the early stages really can make a difference. And it also buys you time to get to that moment where hopefully we get a cure, as well as buying you time to get your affairs in order. One of the questions I asked Dr. Albert is, why are African Americans more at risk? I gave you the statistics in the beginning about if you're African American, Hispanic, or Native American, you're twice as likely to have this disease. She said there are a number of factors, but one that stood out and I wanted to share with you is that many of the diseases that we are more at risk for, and many of the chronic conditions that we are more at risk for, like diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, stroke, conditions that lead to stroke and heart disease, those are diseases, ailments that are more common in our community. So if those are the same things that increase our risk for Alzheimer's, then you understand why we are disproportionately affected by that. But having said that, the good news is that these conditions can be controlled, you know, and I would like, again, when we start taking calls, I'd like to hear how you in the community are controlling these conditions like diabetes, your high cholesterol if you have it, your sugar levels if they're high. These are things that are within our power to do something about, and that's something that over the course of the next Mondays I would like to talk about. Get those things under control, and they really do have a positive impact on what your risk could be down the road for Alzheimer's. Now, another discovery around this disease is that it's influenced by, you hear about the social determinants of health. Well, those are the factors that are in our community, where we live, where we work, where we play, and as well as lifestyle issues like staying mentally active, staying physically active, and I emphasize physically active because we're going to be talking later today with someone who is very much involved in making sure that we get out there and walk. Something as simple as walking can make an impact. Tell you a little bit about the disease itself. There are proteins in our, actually there are proteins in our body. It's called amyloid. There's nothing wrong with having amyloid in your body and in your brain. The problem is when this amyloid starts to build up. It gets out of control and it does something that's called, these proteins start to misfold. Somebody explained it to me, a doctor explained it to me as, think of origami, you know, how it sort of gets misshapen and misfolding. Well, as these proteins build up in the brain, they get in the way of the nerves that are in our brain. There are billions of these nerves in our brain that communicate information from one nerve to the other. When this amyloid, this protein builds up, it gets in the way of the nerves communicating to the other nerve. And when nerves can't communicate, they start to die. And it's that dying of nerves that then brings on the progression of this disease. Now, when we think about a cure or treatment for Alzheimer's, Dr. Albert made the analogy to how we look at treating or preventing heart disease. we think of heart disease as a condition that we manage, right, to prevent what could be a fatal outcome like a heart attack or a stroke. In other words, we tell people, lower your blood pressure, get your cholesterol levels down. That wards off a heart attack. Well, research is also telling us in the area of Alzheimer's that the best time to intervene with brain cells, you know, I talked about how they die if they're not able to make the communication connection. It's at the earliest stages of where this disease takes place. In other words, cells in the brain do not respond well to treatment once they've already started to die off. So Dr. Albert, going back to her research, she's focused on research on following people beginning at middle age, trying to determine, predict if you will, who will be at the greatest risk for developing the disease a decade later. We already know from research in autopsies on people's brains that sometimes they can have this buildup and it doesn't lead, I mean, they didn't die from Alzheimer's, and yet you look at another brain autopsy where they have this buildup and clearly they were suffering from dementia and Alzheimer's. So one of the ideas you want to do is to monitor the situation. You want to get treatment as early as possible, again, to delay the onset and getting at some of those factors that we are talking about and that we will continue to talk about. The other part of this is around caregivers, and that's something that we're going to be talking about in the next half hour. The Alzheimer's story is about the caregivers, people who are taking care of people with the disease. I heard a statistic yesterday, 670,000 caregivers in our state alone. That's just in the state of Pennsylvania. Another very sobering statistic, because this is such a onerous job. It's something we take on because we love our family members, but it is a burden. One report showed that 70% of all caregivers actually pass before the person they're taking care of. That lets you know, that says everything you need to know about how demanding this role is. In terms of the economic burden, $21 billion in cost to the black community from caring for a loved one. And this is also oftentimes because a person either has to take off from work, they have to quit their job, they come with out-of-pocket costs that have to be covered. So when people say this is a public health crisis, when they talk about the emotional toll, all of that is true, but there's also very much a financial burden that's associated with this disease. And I want to just real quickly, because it was raised last week, you know, we had on our show the fabulous jazz trombonist and Philadelphia native Robin Eubanks, who was on talking about how his father had dementia and the economic, and on top of the emotional toll and burden, just the economic burden that fell on the family. And they have resources, so they were able to cover it in a way that most of us are not able to do so. Well, Robin being on spurred a caller to call in, a dear lady named Purnell, who was in her 70s. She was caring for her mom, who was in her late 80s, and she talked about the financial burden of this, the fact that they had to sell their home, and that now these proceeds had dwindled down because her mom had been dealing with this for some time. So I was with Carol Amos was with me last week. Carol Amos has written a book about Alzheimer's. She was a caregiver for her mom. And Carol did a little bit of digging and sent the information to me on the resources that might be available to help Purnell cope with some of the financial burden and responsibility of taking care of someone in the home. And I think it's probably a good idea to maybe at some point over the next few weeks call in someone from the Department of Aging, because there's a website that will take you to a source of where you can go in communities, individual counties, where you can get information on how you can receive reimbursement or compensation for caring for a loved one in your home. And we can go over that information later, and we'll certainly make that website available to you. But it's the, Pennsylvania Aging. And then, of course, it's the corporation here in Philadelphia. Let's say you live in Philadelphia County, you would go to the Philadelphia Corporation for Aging, and they would be able to walk you through the steps to get reimbursements. And that's something that we can talk about either later on today or perhaps next week. But we certainly want to get your calls in. We want to hear what's going on. Your connection, your involvement, your impact around this disease, any questions you might have. I'm getting ready to be joined by my dear friend, Frederica Waugh from the Alzheimer's Association. You can call us at 215-634-8065. Toll-free number is 1-866-361-0900. We are online at WURDradio.com. We're on Facebook Live right now, Facebook at FORWURD forward. We're on Instagram, YouTube, and our Twitter handle is at onWURD. It's at ONWURD, but it's Word 900 AM, 96.1 FM, and we'll be back in just a moment.
News you can use.
Exclusively on Wake Up with Word.
Hosted by the rapping professor, Dr. Aaron Smith. Weekdays, 7 a.m. till 10 a.m.
On Word Radio, wordradio.com, and on the Word Radio app.
Searching for a home care agency that provides care both needed and deserved? Call My Independence at Home at 215-921-2277 for a free in-home consultation. We are committed to providing compassionate home care for the elderly and adults with physical disabilities. 215-921-2277.
Word Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM. WURD.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1,
Word Radio congratulates the Philadelphia winner of our Level Up contest, Martine Augustin.
Level Up.
Despite adversity early on, Martine's work ethic, compassion for people, and incredible decision-making has made her a leader in her community and an embodiment of determination. Martine is currently a criminal justice major in her junior year at Hampton University. She plans to pursue her law degree so that she can better serve her community someday as a Supreme Court justice. At just 20 years old, she has been a volunteer at Say Yes to Education, the Kwanzaa Cooperative, Ngoma Tribute to the Drum, Asada Sankofa Sisterhood, and she founded her own organization, AOA, Ambition Overcomes Adversity, where she mentors young people to overcome any obstacles they may face. Through focus, a loving and supportive community, and sheer will, Martine Augustin has certainly leveled up.
Level Up.
You're listening to The Source
On Word Radio.
96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Welcome back to The Source, WURD 900 AM, 96.1 FM. I'm Renee Chenault-Fatah, guest hosting for Barbara Grant, who's away this month. You can call in at 215-634-8065 or toll-free 1-866-361-0900. Before we talk to my guest today, Frederica Waugh from the Delaware Valley Alzheimer's Association, I'd like to take a call from Rose. Are you there on line one?
Yes.
Hi, Rose. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning. Listen, it's great conversation. It's very effective. It touches home with me. I have a husband, 65 years old, and he has dementia. Now, I was told he has dementia, but after being evaluated with the doctor, they said he has vascular dementia. So it was a lot. It's still a lot. I look at him sometimes. I don't know who I'm looking at. but you know, he's being followed by neurology, but they don't really tell you what to expect. It's like a learning process, just going through it. So you really enlightened me. I heard about that information about that protein again. Can you tell me the name of it and spell it for me?
Sure. It's amyloid.
Yeah.
There's amyloid and tau proteins that build up in the brain. And usually to get, and I have an expert here, so I'm going to turn this over at some point, but usually to get a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, there has to be, when they do the PET scan, when they do the brain scan, they see this accumulation of amyloid in the brain. But Rose, I have a question for you, because you're right, it's so much and it's so overwhelming.
Yeah.
Have you been in contact with the Alzheimer's Association? Do you have a support group that you call on? Because it's, my gosh.
It is. But, you know, I reached out to CareLink. I'm going to follow up with them. That's a support type group. But, like, you know, you try to reach out and then you're told this, you're told that. But my whole issue is with this dementia, they don't tell you what to expect. They don't tell you what to look for. It's like it occurs and then I'm reaching out. This is going on. So I'm looking at my husband. This is a total different person that I've been with for 40 years.
Sure.
Changing overnight, and it takes a toll on you. But then the flip side, you have to figure and reach back how he feels, what he's going through.
Sure.
So,
Rose, I'm going to give you a number, and then we're going to go to Frederica. But the number, do you have a pen available? Because it's just, the reason I want to give you this information is every expert I've talked to across the country, doctors, researchers, scientists, caregivers who have been on the road, the journey that you're now on, they've all said the same thing: to get basic information and understanding. The Alzheimer's Association, they have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week information line where they have experts who are trained in this area, and it will address some of what you're talking about in terms of what to expect. So the number, and I'm going to repeat it throughout the show, so if you don't have a pen, but it's 1-800-272-3900. That number, they're there 24 hours a day, and they can address so many issues, whether it's what to expect, whether it's the financial sort of road that you travel, what resources are available in your community. So that's a starting point. And I'm going to, at this point, introduce Frederica Waugh, who is the Associate Director of Diversity and Inclusion right here in Philadelphia, the Delaware Valley Alzheimer's Association. Frederica, you could not have picked a better time to sort of join me here, because Rose is saying what I have heard so many of us say when we start this road. We don't know what to expect. We don't know where to begin.
No, you're absolutely right, and I do understand what Rose is saying, because this is the question. You go and the person is diagnosed, and then it's now what? So there are, you giving her the helpline number is number one. I always say it's like the magic number for people who are caregivers and for people who are living with the disease. So that is the best number to have. It is 24/7. You will always get a live person who is, trained, master's level education, and training with our helpline personnel goes on constantly. It's not a one and done, because they're constantly being monitored, it's being recorded, and so training is ongoing. But they are a wonderful group of people, and it is 24/7. You can call at 2 a.m. and someone is going to answer. You don't have to call back, and you don't have to put on hold, and all of that. So it's very, very significant.
Rose, does that at least help somewhat in terms of maybe getting you started? Oh, we may have lost Rose, but hopefully Rose will continue to listen, because that is, Frederica, that is the reason why I was so grateful that Sarah Lomax-Reese reached out and said, Renee, would you like to use this as a platform to talk about this subject? Because I have found that as much as it impacts us, at the luncheon I was at on Saturday, I asked everyone in the room, let's see a show of hands. How many people either know someone or are themselves dealing with this? Right. And the vast majority of people held their hands up. Yes. This impacts us all. So that's why I'm so glad you came in. I didn't mean to hit you right away with a caller, but so glad you came in, because you really are this is the place that people need to start off. And it's certainly not the answer, but it gets you on the road to getting information.
It really does. And the other thing that goes with that, you can ask for a care consult. We have a care consultant that you can talk to one-on-one. Your family can talk to one-on-one. You would call the 800 number and ask for that. They'll help you make an appointment, or they'll put you in touch directly with our care consultant. And that helps a lot of people too. Not everyone needs or wants a care consultant, and that's fine. But for those of you who do, that is available. And it's depending on how it works. But I think right now it's open to anyone and everyone, and I don't believe there's a fee for it at the moment. I think there's a grant or something that's happening with that. But it's, some people prefer to have that one-on-one.
Sure. And I'm glad you made the point about it's not just for caregivers, because I've also found that sometimes in focusing on this, we forget the person who has the disease.
Yes.
And there are so many different stages of the disease. In doing the documentary, I'm interviewing several people who, one woman who is, oh my God, she's fabulous. She has mild cognitive impairment, which is, it doesn't always lead to Alzheimer's, but oftentimes it does. Right. So, getting her input, talking to people who are in the middle stages of the disease. It's like, so, yes, we want to focus on caregivers, and caregivers are part of the cure, but this is also about acknowledging the person who, him or herself, is going through this, and how can we help them and make them part of the conversation.
It is. With the Alzheimer's Association, we have people on our national board and on our local boards that have Alzheimer's disease, and so they are able to let people know what's going on with them right now. So it's important that we listen to them, of course, and that we understand. And it's wonderful. I mean, whenever I have the opportunity to talk or listen to someone who is living with the disease, I always do.
Absolutely.
Always do.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's very powerful when you hear people say, look, not about us, without us. And clearly, that is the model that the Alzheimer's Association operates on. But going back to the caregiver issue, what sorts of services outside of the Alzheimer's Association but are available for people? Because I've found that in interviewing caregivers, nobody knows more about this. Nobody has more wisdom or understanding. And oftentimes it's kind of at the end of they've, gone through this journey. So what would you suggest to people in terms of finding time to get involved with a support group, whether it's through your community center, whether it's through our churches? What's the value and what's out there in terms of support like that?
Well, support is important, and because you're not the only one. You don't feel so alone. And this journey is not easy. But, there are many, many, many people out there that will sit with you, cry with you, talk with you, laugh with you about it. Support groups, we have approximately 170 support groups throughout our territory. So in most cases, people can find one near them. There may be a few people who, will have to travel a bit of a distance, but in most cases, support group allows you to be with people who are going through or have gone through the same thing that you're going through. And so it's very, very important. I am a support group facilitator at my church, and it's such a wonderful experience for me, as well as, I hope, and they tell me it is, for the group. So I've heard stories, I know them very well, and we share a lot. I mean, I'm not a caregiver, and I have not been a caregiver, but there are things that I can share with them, and they share with each other. The idea is that they can get on the phone. We only meet once a month, but they can get on the phone with each other or have lunch with each other and help each other make decisions, which they have done, giving information. Oh, well, I did this, or I did that, or my husband is, a veteran, so he's in this particular under this particular type of care. So it's very important that people reach out, and find some support. The other thing is we have an online resource that people need to be aware of. Our local chapter, we have a lot of information. Just the other day, I was in Rehoboth, Delaware, and the woman wanted to know, well, we need to know what are the best places to send people. Well, the Alzheimer's Association will not be able to tell you that because we don't know the places well enough.
Sure.
We have a list of places we can send to you. We can discuss, a list with you, but we don't know them well enough, and we don't want to lead you in the wrong direction. However, if you go online and look for our Community Resource Finder, I'll say that again, Community Resource Finder. So if you do www.alz.org/CRF or /information, anything like that. But while you're on the website itself, the Delaware Valley Chapter website, you will be able to look under resources and find the information I'm talking about. And if you have difficulty finding it, that's when you go to the 800 number. Because I know not all of us, and I'm saying us because I really mean us, navigate these websites well.
Right.
So
you're talking to me,
yeah.
so I understand.
Yeah, so just pick up the phone, call the 800 number, and tell them you're having difficulty, finding it. Can they point it out to you, or can they give you the information to help you walk through that? But it's very important because the more you know, the easier it will be. Like I said, it will never be easy, but information is very, very important that people get that.
Absolutely. You're listening to The Source, your source for information in our community. This is WURD 900 AM, 96.1 FM. I'm Renee Chenault Fatah, guest hosting this month. For Barbara Grant, who is away working on a campaign. We want you to call in because you've been listening to Frederica Waugh from the Alzheimer's Association in Delaware Valley. She is the Associate Director of Diversity and Inclusion. We want to take your calls. We want to hear from you, any questions you might have, any stories you want to share, because, again, we all are impacted by this. The number is 215-634-8065, or you can call toll free at 1-866-361-0900. Fred, you touched on several subjects. One I want to circle back to is around the church's role. Historically, the church has been our go-to for any number of issues. And I think the church certainly has a role to play here. Many churches have health ministries.
Yes.
And certainly as congregants deal with this disease in increasing numbers, there seems to be a real role for churches to play.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I'm very fortunate to be a member of Salem Baptist Church, which is now in Roslyn, Pennsylvania.
And it's beautiful.
Township.
I have to interrupt. I took a tour. Pastor gave me a tour, and it is a spectacular church.
Right.
In fact, I hope to be filming there for our documentary, but I'm sorry. Go
That's
ahead.
okay. That's okay. I appreciate that, and I'm sure he will too. We are moving toward being back into our sanctuary very soon. In fact, he has told us that we will be doing baptism on Easter. So I digress a little bit too. But churches can play a role. Many of our churches have a caregiver support group. And if your church does not, then talk to your pastor or whoever is the worship leader and find out if that can be possible. We also do programming at churches. The church becomes the site for the program, so we're not just there, to talk to the congregants of, for instance, Salem, but it can be a host site for a program. And, we will help you with that if that is something you want to do, because we want to, it has to be open to the community. And so when it's open to the community, then we can help, market it with our tools, but we also expect, you to market it also. But churches can play a role, and some do. We'd like to get more of our churches involved with this, and even to the point of possibly having it so that the person with the disease can be maintained during a service. So they would need, like the caregiver would be looking for respite. The caregiver can be, in the service, listening to the service, enjoying the service, while the person with the disease may be cared for by a professional person.
Absolutely. What an important service to provide to people. You're listening to WURD 900 AM, 96.1 FM. We want you to call in. We're going to go to break, but as we go to break, again, that number is 215-634-8065, toll free 1-866-361-0900. We're talking about Alzheimer's and other dementias' impact in our communities. We'll be right back.
The Source.
The Source.
Weekdays 10 a.m. to 1 p.m.
Special guest host Renation Pata every Monday in April.
The Source. Exclusively on Word Radio and WordRadio.com.
The National Association of University Women presents a youth conference, April 13th at Impact Your World in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Topics include cyberbullying, financial aid, and youth entrepreneurship. Visit 2019 NAUW-youthconference.eventbrite.com.
PICO has many ways to help you lower your energy usage and save money at home. Here's one. When it comes time to replace your old appliances, make sure the new ones you buy are high-efficiency Energy Star certified. You'll get a rebate from PICO and save on your monthly electric bill. You'll find a list of new appliance rebates at pico.com/rebates. Or you can call 1-888-5-PICO-SAVE for all the details. Plus, find instant discounts on smart thermostats and energy-saving light bulbs at pico.com/marketplace. There's free shipping on orders over $49.
Be heard.
Be heard.
Want another way to join the conversation?
Follow us on social media
Using the hashtag onWURD.
Be heard.
Stay connected to Word Radio.
Independent Black Media.
Join Word Radio Friday, April 12th for a pre-celebration of the life and legacy of phenomenal athlete, veteran, and civil rights activist Jackie Robinson at Brown ShopRite, 52nd and Jefferson Streets, beginning at 10 a.m. We're hosting a pre-Jackie Robinson Day celebration featuring a live broadcast with guests who will provide commentary on Jackie Robinson. Come out and enjoy popcorn, hot dogs, and other refreshments. And come early. The first 42 people to start or renew their onWURD membership at this event will receive a discounted rate of just $80. The Jackie Robinson celebration is presented by Brown ShopRite, Dietz & Watson, Amoroso's, Hers, and Canada Dry, and sponsored by Moravia Health.
When you went car shopping, you meant business. You aced vehicle history searches and test drives. You out-salesmaned the salesman. Now you've got your wheels. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll have the info you need to get more for your future. Go to aceyourretirement.org, because when it comes to speeding past financial challenges, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
You're listening to The Source
On Word Radio.
96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Mama said there'll be days like this, there'll be days like this. Mama said, Mama said, Mama said, Mama said there'll be days like this, there'll be days like this. My mama said, Mama said. The day and everything was going fine. I met a little boy named Billy Joe, and then almost lost my mind. Mama said,
welcome back to The Source, WURD 900 AM, 96.1 FM. I'm Renation Pata, guest hosting on Mondays in April for Barbara Grant. You can call us at 215-634-8065 or toll free 1-866-361-0900. And also, because of the times in which we live, we are online at WURDradio.com. We're live on Facebook. We're as a social media at FORWURD, Instagram, YouTube, and our twiddle. As we twiddle, our Twitter handle is at onWURD, onWURD. And I'm here talking with Frederica Waugh, who is the Associate Director of Diversity and Inclusion for the Delaware Valley Alzheimer's Association. And Freddie, in our last caller, Rose, she was talking about her husband having vascular dementia.
Yes.
Could you explain to people what vascular dementia is?
Yes, usually vascular dementia comes after either several mini strokes or one massive stroke. Unfortunately, I didn't get the opportunity to ask her that question, but usually that's what it is. It is because of the blood flow has been halted, stopped, interrupted. It is creating it is disconnecting the flow of blood to the brain. You know, not that it isn't flowing there now for him, of course, but it has happened, and that is a risk situation for a dementia. In this case, it's called vascular dementia. I also noted that she said he was 65, so I'm assuming he's 65 now, which means that we would call that younger onset because this probably didn't just happen. And so anyone 65 or younger that is diagnosed with a dementia, we consider it younger onset. And I mean, people have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's as young as in their 20s. The average younger onset would be somewhere in the early to mid 50s. But it can happen to a lot of people who are under 65, and that's why age is a risk factor. But just because you're 65 or older doesn't mean you're going to have Alzheimer's. Sure. But it also, if you're 65 or younger, doesn't mean that you won't have Alzheimer's.
Right. And you mentioned that younger group and younger onset Alzheimer's. That is the result almost exclusively because of the gene. This is the familial Alzheimer's disease gene, the one of 3 genetic mutations,
right,
which leads to the earlier onset at that age of 20s and 30s
usually,
and 40s.
Yes,
yeah.
Right. Usually it is. Yeah. And but we have to be careful with the genetic part, because this disease doesn't follow one family, sure, you know, from grandparents to parents to you. Because your parents have Alzheimer's doesn't mean that you will. However, it does put you more at risk, 20–30% more at risk for the disease. But the genes, yes, there are several that some of us have, and when we have those genes, it also doesn't mean that you're going to get Alzheimer's. That's why this disease is so hard to find a cure for. Sure. Because you would think, well, if I've got the gene, I'm going to get the disease, and that's that. But that is not true.
Right.
So having gene testing, of course, is up to every individual. I'm not saying you should or you shouldn't, but you know, it depends. If it seems to you, or you know that your family, that many people in your family are being diagnosed with dementia, then you may want to. Early diagnosis is very, very important, because with early diagnosis, that gives you the opportunity to make some decisions.
Absolutely.
To look at planning. You know, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? What's the family going to look like? You know, maybe I need to go ahead and take that trip to Paris now, sure, rather than wait. Sure. You know, but it's very important that people, when you have symptoms, it doesn't mean that you have the disease. You know, absolutely, that's why you need to go and find out. You can start with your primary care physician, but he or she may want to or may need to refer you to a neurologist or a geriatrician to find out for sure. But
it's interesting you mentioned that, Freddie, because as part of the documentary, I was in Georgia doing a good deal of filming, and the Georgia legislature has just created what's called the Georgia Memory Net. And the whole idea behind this, it's funded through their legislature, some $5 million a year for 5 years, is to have a system. And the first part of that system is to make sure that for every wellness visit for Medicare patients 65 and older, you get an exam from a primary care physician. And they'll do a mini cog test, and if they detect any problems, then you're sent to there are 5 regional centers throughout the state where they do the sort of of extensive neurological, clinical, psychological testing that you're talking about. And then they're able to determine, well, okay, yes, this is what you have, and these are the services that are available in your community. But I think your point is, it's so important to get that exam from your primary care physician who can identify the problem.
And I think for those around here, your annual Medicare wellness check is supposed to include at least minimal or beginning questions about your cognitive situation. And your doctor should be asking you those questions.
And if they're not, then that's why awareness and information is so important. If your doctor isn't asking, then it becomes incumbent upon us to say, doctor, this is what you need to do.
Yes.
Let's take a call. We have Jay on line 1. Hey, Jay, it's Renee and Frederica. How are you today?
Good morning. Calling from Louisiana. Great platform you guys have out there in Philly.
Thank you.
Especially dealing with health in our community. One of the things listening to your show, one of the things I want to go back to when you mentioned about stroke and the connection or lack of or thereof a connection to stroke, and what connection does having calcified arteries and veins in your bloodstream? Is there a connection? Because I'm one who took control of my health after having experiencing high blood pressure. And I started doing research naturally how to deal with that, not going against my doctor's orders, but looking at other alternatives and finding out about nitric oxide, finding out about calcium buildup in your bloodstream as it relates to, so taking vitamin K2 and D3, how much that in preventative medicine play a role in at least slowing down the progression of those diseases you're discussing now. I don't know if that's a convoluted question.
No, not at all, Jay, not at all. And again, I'm not an expert, but I do want to tell you just what I've learned in terms of risk factors, and then I'm going to turn it over to Freddie. But in doing the documentary that I've been working on, several of the doctors have told me that the simple 7, the tips that are used to prevent heart disease, they said are also applicable for Alzheimer's, that, keeping your cholesterol levels low and, knowing, what your numbers are in terms of, your sugar and making sure you get exercise and eating healthy, that there is very much a connection there. And they say if you follow those 7 simple steps, they call them simple, it's not always easy changing behavior, but if you follow those 7 that impact the condition of your heart, it will also reduce your risk for Alzheimer's disease. So just based on what you say, I commend you for taking control of your health, and like you said, you're not ignoring your doctor, but you're exploring what's out there, and that I think by doing one, you certainly are benefiting the other. Freddie?
That is definitely true. If you have a healthy heart, you'll have a healthy brain. If you have a healthy brain, you'll have a healthy heart. So it's very important that you do follow those things. Yes, stroke, you're talking about, I think you said calcium, and yes, that's, like hardening of the arteries, clogging up your arteries. So yes, we need to reduce that. And you can reduce that by looking at your diet. What are you eating? Looking at your numbers, like Renee said, you have to know what is high blood pressure, what do those numbers look like, high cholesterol, diabetes, are you overweight, and all of those things you can control. So you can do some exercise. You can, even if it's, if you don't have a gym membership, put on your sneakers or very comfortable shoes and walk. And every day, go a little further. You start maybe this week I'm going to walk around the block. Next week, I'm going to walk around 2 blocks and go on that way. Look at what you're eating. And the reason is because you can add healthier years to your life. We're not saying that it's going to prevent you from getting Alzheimer's disease. We're not at that point. Hopefully, we will get to that point where we can say that. But right now, that's not what the research is telling us. But what the research is telling us is that if we are healthy, and still, unfortunately, we get Alzheimer's. Living with Alzheimer's will be so much better. And I'll give you one quick example of what I'm talking about. If you have high blood pressure and you get headaches when your blood pressure goes up, and you also have Alzheimer's, that's going to be difficult because there's going to come a time where you're not going to be able to recognize that you can say to someone, I need a Tylenol. So you're going to be in pain from this headache because your blood pressure went up. And so that means that now you're going to exhibit some very negative behavior because you're in pain, but you're unable to communicate that to your caregiver. So that's why I say to people, get healthy. It's never too late to start getting healthy, but get healthy because we don't know who is going to be the unfortunate person to have Alzheimer's disease. So we all have to get healthy. And your doctors can work with you on that. You know, you don't have to go to a specialist. You can try, you know, even Weight Watchers, but it's just like this other, you know, the 7 things are simple. You know what you're not supposed to eat. I know what I'm not supposed to eat, you know.
But it's taking control of our health, which it sounds like what Jay is doing, and monitoring our conditions. Like you said, Freddie, if you know you have high blood pressure, if you know you have diabetes, those are conditions that we can get under control. And Jay, I would just say one more thing, and I'm so glad you called from Louisiana, but the documentary that I'm working on, one of the focuses is on the stroke belt. There are about 9 states in the South, Louisiana being one of them, where people are more likely not just to have stroke, but as African Americans, more likely for those strokes to be fatal. And it circles back from what the research is showing us. The NIH gave $25 million, I think, to the University of Alabama to research this, but that it ties in with diet, with exercise, all of the things that we know increases our chances. And like Frederica said, there's no guarantee, but if we can be our healthiest, best selves, that's giving us a leg up. But Jay, we really, bless you, Kayla. we really appreciate you calling in and talking to us this morning. Did that answer you? I'm sorry, go ahead. Glad you're still there.
2 words, and I'm going to drop off the line. We have bad food culture. People think it's great, but I know living in Louisiana, we eat too much of a lot of stuff that's bad for us. Well, that is the problem.
It's not just Louisiana. It's not just Louisiana. We eat cheesesteaks here in Philly. So.
Yes.
But Jay, thank you so much for calling, and check back with us. Okay, it's good to know you're out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
You are listening to WURD 900 AM, 96.1 FM. We want to hear from you. We're getting ready to go to break, but we're talking about Alzheimer's and bringing awareness in our community because it is an issue that impacts us. And I want to thank my guest, and I hope she comes back, because Frederica Waugh, like I started off by saying, when I started this project, everybody told me she's the lady you need to talk to, and it's so true. Frederica Waugh, the Associate Director of Diversity and Inclusion at the Delaware Valley Alzheimer's Association. My sister, we share a birthday together.
Yes, we do, yes.
Thanks so much, Freddie. Be sure and check back with us.
Thank you so much, because we really appreciate it. It's wanting the community to know that we're here to help, and that the resources are available. We may not have a resource for every single person, but we do have resources in this community. And please, please call that 800 number. You know, even for questions, you know, like with Jay, who just got off the line, he could have called the 800 number for that type of question. So, but please do that. And thank you again, Renee, so much.
Thank you, Frederica. And that number, 1-800-272-3900. That's the Alzheimer's Association 24/7 helpline. We'll be right back.
Philly, D.C., and everything in between. Reality Check with Charles Ellison. Breaking down the latest in local and national news. Monday through Thursday, 4 p.m. till 7 p.m. Right here on Word Radio.
Looking for Afrocentric art, gifts, home decor, accessories, custom framing, and so much more? Visit LaBelle Art Gallery, located at 53 Kings Highway East in Haddonfield, New Jersey, or online at labelleartgallery.com. Host your own private event in this beautiful gallery today.
In celebration of the 20th anniversary of the Drexel University Jazz Extravaganza, the Drexel University Jazz Orchestra will once again share the stage with the Howard University Jazz Ensemble. The Howard Jazz Ensemble, directed by Fred Irby III, and the Drexel Jazz Orchestra, directed by Brent White, will perform compositions by Benny Golson, Herbie Hancock, Randy Weston, Lou Donaldson, and other masters of the jazz tradition. Special guest artists for the evening will be Dr. George L. Starks Jr., former director of the Drexel University Jazz Orchestra and founder of the annual Jazz Extravaganza, and Professor Joseph Jennings, former director of the Spelman College Jazz Ensemble. The concert will take place on Friday, April 12th at 7 p.m. in the Mandel Theater, 33rd and Chestnut Streets on the Drexel University campus. The event is free and open to the public. For more information, please call 215-895-2451.
Drive in with the rapping professor,
Dr. Aaron Smith.
Drive home
with Charles Ellison.
This is Word Radio, 96.1 FM
and 900 AM WURD.
Philadelphia, independent black media.
Welcome back to The Source, WURD 900 AM, 96.1 FM. I'm Renee Chenault Fatah, guest hosting for Barbara Grant. You can call in at 215-634-8065 or toll free. That number is 1-866-361-0900. We're talking about Alzheimer's and other dementias in communities of color. I started working on my documentary on this subject, I guess about a year and a half ago. I was inspired, and I think I shared this last week, in learning that famed Harvard Law professor Charles Ogletree he made the announcement here in Philadelphia that he had been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. It was hearing that in conjunction with an article that I read in the Washington Post, written by journalist, author, and teacher Marita Golden, who has since, I'm happy to say, become a friend. Marita also, in addition to the Washington Post article, has written a terrific novel about love and Alzheimer's, so no surprise she would also have thoughts about the current situation involving style icon B. Smith and her husband Dan Gatsby. This article recently appeared in The Root online. We're going to be talking about that coming up. But calling in right now to talk first about this article and about the work she's done around Alzheimer's is life coach, author, master teacher, writer, workshop presenter, Marita Golden. Hey, Marita, how are you this Monday morning?
Hi, Renee. I'm very glad to be on the program with you today.
It's so good to hear your voice. You know, I shared last week with folks that you really were the inspiration, along with Professor Ogletree, for me wanting to tell this story because the way you told it in the Washington Post. And I encourage people to Google it and read it because it just brought such... It was clear that not only are you a wonderful storyteller, but you're also a terrific journalist. Could you just share a little bit about the article for people who because this was a while back that you wrote this subject?
People can actually access the article on my website, www.marita.golden.com in the media section. But it's an article about the impact of Alzheimer's disease on African Americans, and Alzheimer's disease is not something that I'm impacted by in my personal life. I'm not caring for anyone with it. I don't have any family members with it. But a lot of times when you're a writer, you will just sort of get called. You just get called by the universe to write something. And you don't know why. And in my novels and my work, I've been unafraid to tackle challenging, difficult subjects. So this was another challenging, difficult subject. So I spent about 4 years researching and imagining and writing my novel, The Wide Circumference of Love. And while I was doing my research, I discovered the statistic that African Americans are twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's as whites. And the statistic was stunning, but what was even more stunning was that along the process of doing my research, I found that so many people who actually work with people with Alzheimer's, doctors and healthcare professionals, were not aware of that statistic.
Right.
So I then felt, oh my goodness, here's another story, because I write as a journalist, a novelist, a memoirist. So I took the statistic to a friend of mine who was an editor at the Sunday magazine at the Washington Post, and she said, okay, we got to find out what's going on here. So I then spent another 8 months.
Which is how great stories oftentimes unfold.
Yeah, over 8 months or more, yeah. Talking to researchers and advocates who were really trying to find out why that statistic exists. And so that led me to really meeting additional families who were struggling with the disease. So it's a story, the magazine article sort of profiles this one family in Cheverly, Maryland, where the husband was very, very open, Mr. Williams, to sharing their journey with me. There were some people who really felt that they didn't want to go public, who felt some stigma, some shame around this, but he jumped at the opportunity to educate the public.
Let me interrupt you right there, Marita, because I think that is such an important part of this story. And our last guest, who is the Associate Director of Diversity and Inclusion for the Alzheimer's Association here in the Philadelphia region, I didn't get a chance to raise this with her, so I want you to continue telling your story, but I do want to just interject. That's what I think makes this story so hard in getting people to talk. It's still this stigma. I mean, if you had cancer, if you had asthma, you had, heart condition, you wouldn't be hesitant to talk in the same way that our community, and I know we have issues around a number of issues, if you will, but for this one, there seems to be shame and stigma that shouldn't be there, and certainly gets in the way of telling the story. How did you get around that? Because I've found that to be a real obstacle in terms of telling this story in film.
Well, I think we have to also remember that there was a time when cancer was stigmatized.
Well, that's true.
I remember back in 1995.
The C word, right.
Yeah, when my husband had lymphoma, and fortunately he survived. I'll never forget, a friend of mine called, and she said, she left a message on my answering machine. Oh, Marita, I'm so sorry. I understand Joe is having some challenges. She didn't want to say that he had cancer.
Wow.
No, he had cancer.
Right,
That was the challenge.
Right.
And there was a time when people would not, AIDS, cancer, there was a time when people would not say that people died of cancer in obituaries.
Right.
So a lot of these diseases have been stigmatized. But I think with Alzheimer's, there's the additional stigma that it impacts the brain, and people sort of confuse it with a mental illness, which it is not. And
there's a whole stigma around that shouldn't exist, but that's a subject for another day. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
right.
I just sort of, dove in.
Right. And you said Mr. Williams was and he clearly was in this article, just so open and willing to tell this story.
And he had a very inspiring story. And one of the things that kept me going during the years that I was researching Alzheimer's, and since I had become an Alzheimer's activist, is the many stories that people have told me of experiencing, as they care for their loved one, a very deep and powerful connection with them, and a transformative kind of love for the person, even as they are caring for them through enormous challenges. And those are the kinds of stories that really made it possible for me to see the deeper spiritual meanings in caring for someone with Alzheimer's, and other dimensions of the disease.
Marita, I want to continue this conversation, but we're going to go to a break. And I'm going to shift gears just a little bit, and then we're going to come back because I want to talk more about the workshops that you do, but I also want to talk about your book, which leads us into the conversation that, you know, has sort of dominated the headlines over the past few months, and that's the B. Smith, Dan Gaspey situation, which, you know, brought attention to caregiving in a way that has never been brought to the fore before, but there are some ancillary issues that, you know, involve, I think, race and gender and, you know, how we talk about this disease. So if you're kind enough to stay on the line, I'm talking with author, journalist, master coach Marita Golden. She has an amazing book. She has an incredible article in The Root that I'm going to give the website for, because everybody should read this article because it really is taking us in a new, very important direction in terms of talking about this. But you're listening to WURD. We want you to call in. It's 215-634-8065, and we are right back.
I'm singing Mary. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. Tell Martha not to mourn. Martha, don't you mourn. Well, 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 Mary, don't you weep. Tell Martha not to mourn. Martha, don't you mourn. 'Cause Pharaoh's army, don't you know they've been drowned?
You're listening to WURD Radio. We have been talking about Alzheimer's and other dementias in communities of color. My name is Renee Chenault-Fatah. I am guest hosting all this month on Mondays from 10 to 1 p.m. And I'm guest hosting for Barbara Grant. We're going to shift directions. We've been talking about Alzheimer's. Part of the reason I wanted to do this documentary is because I believe in the power of storytelling. And needless to say, I'm in my 7th decade of storytelling. But there are a lot of very young storytellers out there. And I am just so excited and honored to have one of these young people in the studio with me today. But I wanted to get to him because he's missing class to be here, and I don't want him missing class. But joining me right now is Greg Starks. He's a sophomore high school student at Springside Chestnut Hill Academy in Philadelphia. And Greg was introduced to me as somebody who has a passion for storytelling, and he's really sort of carved out a terrific niche for himself at the school around interviewing and filming his classmates. And Greg, first, it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
And I appreciate the school letting you come here, and I appreciate your grandmother and your dad for bringing you here. Talk to me about this project, because it's created a lot of buzz on campus.
So my project is called Stark Stories, and I interview student athletes who have committed to play at the next level, which is collegiate sports. And I look to try to inform people that the stories of them off the field, like not just their athletic abilities, but how they are at home, what they miss about the school, what they love about the school, why they love playing here, and all those type of things.
Okay. Who are some of the athletes that you've interviewed at school?
I've interviewed good friends that committed, but the biggest, most notable person I've interviewed was Monet Davis. And we've actually had a good conversation about HBCUs while we were talking.
Oh, okay. We've got a lot of ground to cover then. First, tell me about Monet Davis. How was that interview? What was she like? What is she like? And how did that come about?
For me, that was probably my hardest interview because I was up all night trying to formulate questions that I haven't heard or been asked before, trying to be original. And it was a very easy and chill interview. She was very relaxed because, you know, she's done it a ton of times.
I mean, is she amazing or what?
She's
been
really
on the cover of Vogue. She's been on the cover of Sports Illustrated. I know when I was working at NBC 10, we interviewed her. Yeah, she's pretty amazing.
And the interview went well. A couple of reruns because the cameras were messed up, but overall went really well. And she even said, apparently to the Dr. Drugan, the school's president, that I've asked her questions that she really had to think about. So that really helped me.
How did that feel? Because like you said, she's been interviewed by everybody. So to know that you hit on things that others hadn't.
Yeah, that made me feel really well and that all my hard work paid off.
And you two talked about HBCUs. Now, Monet is going to be going to Hampton, which is where my niece is. So when I heard that, I was like, yes, excellent. But what was your conversation, and how did that maybe give you ideas about where you might want to go for college? You still have a few more years at SCH, but I know you're already thinking about the college process.
Well, I just mentioned that you committed to Hampton, and I figure that she's probably been offered by other bigger schools. And she said yes, that was true, but she said Hampton for her just felt like home. The community was very close, and she said a bunch of her friends told her just try Hampton, and she just went there and said it felt really good. And for me, I'm also looking at HBCUs, and the biggest one for me is probably Howard or NCA&T. Mm-hmm. So those...
Uh-oh. Kaylee, you got something to say about North Carolina A&T? North Carolina A&T is terrific. In fact, North Carolina A&T is part of my documentary. Dr. Goldie Bird is at North Carolina A&T and has done incredible research. But anyway, what about an HBCU appeals to you? Because I've heard this before. There is a sense of community and identity that is key, I think.
I think just being around people who look like me, it just brings everyone closer together, and the accomplishment, and feel the pride and everything that's going around on the campus community. It's amazing. Okay.
Let's go back to your storytelling. Why? Because everybody, Dr. Steve Drugan, head of Springside Chestnut Hill Academy, he came into one of the board meetings and talked about you and the passion for your project and what an amazing young man you are. So you clearly, you radiate this strength, and there's something very special about you. Why did you decide that this is the way in which you chose to express your interest in who you are? What is it about interviewing others?
Well, I've always had a passion for sports, and I also had a passion for stories. And when I'm home, I love watching the ESPN 30 for 30s, and I love the way those stories are formulated, and I figured I could merge the two and become a sports journalist. And I figured one day, while I was sitting in the library, I went in and asked Dr. Drugan, what can I do, if there's anything I could do around the campus to further my career into sports journalism. And we both decided on doing the Athletes of the Week at first. So I figured that was a great idea. So I chose my friend Jali. We were both close, and he was my first.
Who I also interviewed. Jali was part of the Little League, right, the Taney Dragons, yes.
And so he was my first interview.
How did that go?
It went really well, and since people were surprised that was my first one, since I expected it to be really rusty, but apparently it was very well done. So that's what pushed me even more to keep going. And after that, I finished that one. It shocked me how much time it took into it. So I figured I can't keep putting these out every week. So I decided to
because you had other subjects that were requiring you to. Yeah, it's a rigorous curriculum.
So I just decided on picking athletes who have committed to colleges instead, and that would be a much easier task.
What is the hardest part for you of interviewing people?
For me, it's probably coming up with the questions and the editing, because a lot of people aren't really easy on camera. They're like fidgeting a lot, and and you have to just find key points to just take out, and to be very particular when you're editing.
Okay. I know that you said HBCUs are an interest, but have you ruled out schools in this area? I know your mom and we've talked, and Drexel is high on somebody's list. So have you completely ruled out schools in this area? And you do have time. You're a sophomore, right? Yeah, so you still have a little bit of time.
I'm looking at St. Joe's too.
Terrific schools.
Drexel, of course, like you said, my mom really wants me to go there.
We moms have to stick together here. Although I'm a big believer in HBCUs, so I do hear you on that.
I know Drexel's a good school and all, but it's just I've been there so much since he works there. I feel like I want something new. So, but I'm not ruling that out as an option for college.
Okay. What are your plans for the summer?
I'm hoping to work in internships and hopefully at Comcast or NBC Sports, so I can further my sports journalism career. So I'm speaking to people. I just sent an application to WHYY for like a summer program that furthers young journalists.
Hopefully they're listening. And I know Stephen A. You
Yes.
you admire his work, so perhaps Stephen A. is out there listening, and there might be an internship possibility for you. But Greg, I really appreciate you coming in and talking with us. Like I said, you impress everybody with your passion for this and your abilities. You are light years ahead. I watched your material, and I thought, my God, this young man is, in high school and doing this, but your poise and your brilliance, the fact that Monet told you, you were able to ask questions that others hadn't, you are just well on your way. And I just want you to know we're all really, really proud of you and plan to watch what you do in the future. A lot of great things are in store we've been talking to Greg Starks. We're getting ready to go to break. And when we come back, we're going to pick up with Marita Golden on the conversation around Alzheimer's and other dementias in communities of color, and an article that Marita wrote, which has gotten a lot of attention about the B. Smith, Dan Gatsby situation, being a caregiver and the burdens and responsibilities that come with that. We're right back.
Since 1904, Philly's top sandwich pros and homemakers have always started the exact same way, with those legendary Amoroso's rolls baked fresh daily. Word family, put Amoroso's rolls on your shopping list for your kids' school lunches and your next family gathering. Want to make your very best sandwiches? Always start with the very best sandwich rolls. Pick them up today at your favorite supermarket or food store. Amoroso's, why Philly's sandwiches are world famous.
Listen live at WordRadio.com.
Who will protect the citizens of the tri-state area from careless motorists, doctors who make medical mistakes, and companies that make defective products? Who will ensure that property owners are held accountable for dangerous conditions on their land? Who will represent the people with the honesty, integrity, and compassion that they deserve?
I will. I'm Sam Anion, your advocate, your lawyer. But most importantly, I'm your friend.
For more information, call 215-935-6901. That's 215-935-6901. Call now.
Hurry into McDonald's and get the flaky bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit or the savory bacon, egg, and cheese McGriddles, each at the low price of just $2, only at McDonald's.
You're listening to The Source
on Word Radio,
96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Welcome back to The Source, your source for information in our community. This is WURD 900 AM, 96.1 FM. I'm Renee Chenault Fatah, guest hosting this month for Barbara Grant on Mondays from I started to say from 1, not from 1, from 10 to 1. Barbara's away this month. You can call in at 215-634-8065. Toll free, that number is 1-866-361-0900. In the last segment, we were talking with a young high school student who has a passion for storytelling. That was Greg Starks from Springside Chestnut Hill Academy. And I guess what I loved is on the break, Kayla D had an idea for Greg to maybe pursue in terms of attending a conference, the Washington Journalism and Media Conference. And that's what I love about sharing information and the whole idea of it takes a village. All of us have a role to play. But we had brought Greg in because we were actually in a conversation with Marita Golden, and Greg had taken time off from high school, and I wanted to get him back in the classroom. So I now want to pick up with the conversation we were having with Marita Golden, journalist, novelist. She's written an incredible article in the root of talking about the firestorm, really, that's resulted from, we all know and have watched and admired over the years Bea Smith. She is a style, media, restaurateur, icon. I have her cookbooks every Thanksgiving. I fix, her bourbon corn pudding. I used to watch her show on WNBC in New York. Bea Smith is an idol and an icon in our community. And she was diagnosed some 6 years ago with Alzheimer's, and her husband, business partner, Dan Gatsby, right away stepped up and said, he was, her caregiver, and they decided to write a book and spoke at a number of different conferences and events around Alzheimer's and bringing awareness. And it's only been recently that I guess the attention has turned negative and critical, because Dan was featured in, I believe, a Washington Post expose or a story in which there was a video component, and it was clear that he has a girlfriend who lives in their home from time to time. Dan also had been posting on Facebook for about a year on the challenges of caregiving and how, he now has Alexander Lerner, who is his girlfriend. And there was a lot of critical attention focused on this relationship. And Marita Golden wrote an article in The Root that I think really took a very bold position, but also the position that I think we need to be focused on as we go forward on this disease that not enough of us understand or are talking about. Marita, let me stop right there, and maybe you can sort of bring people up to date on the article you wrote and the positions you took.
Well, I think that one of the things what happened was the Washington Post assigned a reporter to spend some time with Bea Smith and Dan Gatsby. And the focus of the article was, the fact that this very famous African-American woman has Alzheimer's, but also the larger issue of caregivers' care, self-care.
Right.
And I think that the video, it did have a video component where you saw Bea Smith, Dan Gatsby, Dan's daughter, Dana, I think her name is, and Alex, all basically sort of living their life together as a kind of extended family. So how I opened my story is I said that when some people saw that video, they saw a travesty. I saw a 21st century extended family dealing with one of the cruelest diseases of our time. And I'm going to be honest here and say that I did feel, and I'm just going to say it, I felt a little resistance as an African-American woman. Frankly, I'm just going to say it because his girlfriend was white.
Right.
Because much of the problem that some people have with this is, well, she's white. Well, it took me about, half a day to get over that sort of default setting reaction that African-American women have when you have a prominent black man, a prominent black woman. And then to say, okay, what's the real issue here? And for me, the real issue was the self-care of caregivers. And so I use the article to talk a lot about the fact that whether you think that Dan Gatsby has overshared or whether you think he's, quote, as some people have said, exploiting his wife, whatever, he is talking about when you separate the firestorm from the real issue, the issue of self-care for caregivers. And when we say self-care, we're talking about the fact that 70% of caregivers for those with dementia and Alzheimer's die before the person that they're actually caring for.
Right.
And they die before the person they're caring for because they neglect their own mental, spiritual, soul health to care for the person.
I don't think anybody understands how just overwhelming and 24/7 the role of caregiver is. And the fact that that statistic you just cited, 70%, tells you everything you need to know about the toll and the price that's taken for caregiving. So you're absolutely right. This whole issue of self-care and what about the caregiver? And
yeah, exactly. And see, I know Dan, and he told me that they sat down together when she got the diagnosis and said, she said, I want to write a book. They've always been activists. Virtually every aspect of their life has been, a lot of their life has been public. They've lived in the public.
Right.
And they were comfortable with living in the public. And so she saw the disease as having the disease and responding to it by writing a book and talking about it as a continuation of a form of activism that they'd always been involved in. So I think that when we talk about self-care, we really are also talking about emotional care. And these were two people, and I'm going to take at face value what Dan and Alex have said about their relationship, that they met, both of them, in a time of despair and need and found comfort. I'm going to take Dan at his word.
Sure.
That B told him that she wanted him to be happy, and we know what that means when a spouse.
Absolutely.
If I say I want you to be happy, so that for me, the relationship that he had with her was simply a way for me to talk about the larger issue of self-care. And I understand people have religious, ethical, moral values that may put them in a different place that's less accepting. But the other point I made in the piece is that Alzheimer's has changed everything.
Yes.
It's going to change the culture. It's going to change relationships. Grandchildren are growing up only knowing their grandparents with dementia.
Right, right.
So that the economy's changed. So that this is just another thing that is changing. And the firestorm was so negative. And, you know, when people get on the Internet, they'll say things that they would never say.
They would never say. I mean, there's a lot of good about technology and the Internet, and there's a lot of bad, and that's certainly the downside. You're listening to WURD Radio, the source for information in our community. We'd love for you to call in. The number is 215-634-8065. Toll free, it's 1-866-361-0900. My name is Renee Chenault Fatah. I'm guest hosting for Barbara Grant this month, and I am talking to Marita Golden, who has written an amazing novel around Alzheimer's. She wrote an article in the Washington Post several years ago that is on her website, and I'm going to have her give that information for the website in just a second. But it was the inspiration, really, for me wanting to do the documentary that I'm working on. And right now we're talking about firestorm, and that's putting it mildly, that surrounded the B. Smith, Dan Gatsby story that has that several weeks ago. It sort of died down a little bit, but several weeks ago certainly was front and center. I had Marita has written an article on The Root. I wrote an article for the Philadelphia Inquirer, approaching it from the perspective, and Marita has touched on this, on how it makes it very important to have a conversation about how you want to be cared for in the event, and it's becoming increasingly common, that you were to have Alzheimer's or dementia. And Marita shared the fact that Dan and B had a conversation where she said, I want you to be happy, and we know we know what that means. The article that I wrote focused on how people need to be thinking about how you want to be cared for, the legal aspects of, having advance directives and power of attorneys. But it really, Marina, you say it so perfectly. This disease has turned things on its head. What it means for, till death do us part. I've had conversations, I've interviewed caregivers, and they've said that, if I have this disease, I want my spouse to go on and have a life and to be happy, as what apparently B said to Dan. I've also had caregivers who say that death do us part means death do us part. And I expect you to be there for me, whether it's, Alzheimer's, whether it's whatever. But again, it's forcing us to have conversations that we perhaps would not have had before.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing about Dan that made the attack so strange is that he was in a no-win situation with certain pockets of our community.
Mm-hmm.
If he put D. Smith in a assisted living facility, why did you desert?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If he develops a relationship with another woman, why did you develop a relationship? If he hid the relationship with another woman, why are you hiding the relationship?
Right. It was no way. But you know what, Marita? You said something. You're right. I mean, you can't win. But you did say something in your article, which I think is sort of a cultural thing. We in our community, and it's dangerous to generalize because we're not monolithic, but I do think that we feel we are supposed to take care of our loved ones to the very end. And this is a disease which, as it progresses, makes it much more difficult to do that. And people tend to judge. And I think that's also the responsibility, or the burden is a tough word, but it really is a burden that falls on caregivers in our community. You feel that this is your responsibility as an African-American daughter, wife, sister, whatever. And you touched on that, correct?
Yeah, and see, there's a long history of our people being neglected and poorly cared for in health institutions.
Yes, that's the other issue.
I was shocked to know that I saw a statistic recently that the distrust of the medical community even today is so deep that about 25% of African Americans just say they don't go to the doctor.
Right.
They just don't trust doctors, period.
Right.
But at the same time, the stereotype that we are so traumatized by that history of exploitation and maltreatment that, for example, we won't be part of clinical studies and trials. That's not true.
It's not true, and doctors I was going to say Goldie Bird has pushed back on that and has shown that, if you treat us with dignity and give us the information, of course we'll participate in clinical research.
Definitely.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that it's a mixed picture. But it's a real conundrum. For example, in the article I profiled Mr. Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Now, his wife, he had been very fortunate that he was in the Air Force, and he was able to get, when he was in the Air Force, he got long-term care insurance at a really big discount.
Wow, what a blessing.
But even with that, and he put his wife in a 5-star memory care unit. But when I met him, he told me, he said, look, she's had Alzheimer's for about 3 or 4 years. We cared for her at home first, and then we had to put her in this facility because of the kind of care she needed.
Mm-hmm.
But he was that long-term care insurance was rapidly running out, and he was telling me he was going to have to go do a GoFundMe page to help him pay for his wife, because he's going to have to move her out of that 5-star memory care to one that he wouldn't necessarily be so happy with. Now, she died while I was doing the story, but that shows you the difficult choices and the conundrum. But more and more people are going to be cared for at home because there are not going to be enough facilities.
And not being able to afford it.
And so the federal government is going to have to step up on basically, there's some states where caregivers get a stipend, almost a salary, for caring for people at home.
And that should be the national standard.
Yeah.
This family that I'm profiling in the documentary in Baltimore, I was staggered by the amount of money they pay a month. Who can afford $7,000 a month for a memory care facility? In fact, the woman, the daughter who's basically the primary caregiver, she changed careers so she could work at the memory care center to help, to get a discount.
Wow.
But it's just, it's such an onerous cost that, as you said, many people cannot afford that, and the states and our federal government, needs to step in and provide assistance, especially if the push is to stay at home as long as possible.
Yeah, and people have to stay at home because they can't afford any other option.
Yes.
And then middle class people find themselves in a situation where they're not poor enough
Right.
for Medicaid.
Right. You're caught in the gap.
Yeah, you're caught in the gap.
Yeah.
So we need some more congressmen and senators to have to deal with this issue because they only seem to get it when it affects them.
Which is why I think we saw this BOLD Act passed in Congress. I mean, how often do you see any sort of bipartisan activity coming out of Congress? And I think it's because on both sides of the aisle, again, this is an issue, this public health crisis, that does not discriminate in terms of who is impacted. I think as more and more people are coming to terms with this as the reality until there's a cure. Let's talk a little bit about what you're doing right now. You conduct workshops. Tell me about that.
Well, I want to talk about that and also the new book. This Alzheimer's.
You're working on a new book.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about the new book and then my workshops. In September, Skyhorse Publishers will be releasing an anthology that I did called Us Against Alzheimer's: Stories of Family, Love, and Faith. And when I was working on my Alzheimer's research, I discovered the organization Us Against Alzheimer's, which is a fantastic organization that is one of the leading advocacy groups in the country around greater awareness, searching for a cure. And I was particularly impressed that they really target African Americans, Latinos, women to be part of that journey, finding a cure, advocacy, research, all of that. So as part of my support of that organization, I have done this anthology, all the profits of which are going to support the work of Us Against Alzheimer's.
That's wonderful, Marita. How can people get access to the... I know you said it's not out to the fall.
Yeah,
Would they go to your website?
Well, it's not on my website yet, so you'll have to have me back on the show.
Okay. Anytime. You've got the number now. You can call it.
So I'm very pleased that it's a multicultural book. It's fiction and nonfiction stories by either caregivers, family members, or people who've been impacted. I also have an excerpt from On Pluto, which is a book written by Greg O'Brien,
who's wonderful.
Living with the disease.
Yes.
So I have pieces from people from Trinidad, Haiti, India, Dominican Republic. So I'm very pleased that it's a multicultural aspect. So that's my most recent, writing project, and that's coming to a close now. But yeah, I do spend a lot of time doing writing workshops. My background is that I taught writing in the graduate creative writing programs at George Mason University, Virginia Commonwealth University, and I've taught at Johns Hopkins and a bunch of other places. But I do my own writing workshops where I work with a particular kind of audience. I've worked with a lot of times people who are really good writers, who are beginning to write, but who've never taken a formal workshop. And I find that I'm able to get these amazing stories. People have
and I imagine that would appeal to a lot of people who have talent but have just never formally received the sort of guidance or structure that you need. Marita, we have to go to break. Could I get your website so I can share that with people, so if they wanted to find out about the workshop. And then, of course, I'm going to have you back because this anthology that you're talking about is so very important. And you touch on the Caribbean community. I've talked to so many people who, as little information as we have here in the States, it's even less there. So that's a whole nother issue. But real quick, as we go to break, if you could give folks your website.
www.maritagolden.com.
Maritagolden.com. And I will repeat that throughout the remainder of the show. But Marita, thank you so very much for calling in. You have so much information, and like I said, you really were the inspiration for me getting started in trying to tell this story. So I look forward to your book and to hearing from you in the future. But that was Marita Golden. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, Marita.
Take care. Bye-bye.
When we come back, we're going to be talking to a member of the phenomenal Girl Trek and how, I tell you folks, all roads in a sense relate back to Alzheimer's. But Girl Treks, Susie Page will be joining us when we return. You're listening to WURD, The Source, your source for information in our community. And we want to hear from you. We're taking your calls at 215-634-8065, toll free 1-866-361-0900. We're right back.
Support independent black media and join the 4WORD movement now at 215-425-7875
or visit wordradio.com.
Pennsylvania is in the midst of the worst ever overdose death epidemic and the worst public health crisis in the last 100 years. The Pennsylvania Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs is leading the efforts to prevent and reduce drug, alcohol, and gambling addiction and abuse, and has undertaken initiatives to reduce the human and economic impact of the epidemic with the prevention and treatment of substance use. If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, get help now. Call 1-800-662-HELP. That's 1-800-662-HELP. Call today.
Support independent black media and join the 4WORD movement now at 215-425-7875
or visit wordradio.com.
The Sweet Treat Hut is the highest-rated juice bar in Philly, located on the corner of 50th and Thompson Streets, providing delicious, healthy vegan food, juices, and smoothies. Treat yourself to a cup of happiness. Call 215-877-1471.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Rocky.
Word Radio congratulates the Philadelphia winner of our Level Up contest, Martine Augustin.
Level Up.
Despite adversity early on, Martine's work ethic, compassion for people, and incredible decision-making has made her a leader in her community and an embodiment of determination. Martine is currently a criminal justice major in her junior year at Hampton University. She plans to pursue her law degree so that she can better serve her community someday as a Supreme Court justice. At just 20 years old, she has been a volunteer at Say Yes to Education, the Kwanzaa Cooperative, Ngoma Tribute to the Drum, Asada Sankofa Sisterhood, and she founded her own organization, AOA, Ambition Overcomes Adversity, where she mentors young people to overcome any obstacles they may face. Through focus, a loving and supportive community, and sheer will, Martine Augustin has certainly leveled up.
Level Up.
You're listening to The Source
on Word Radio,
96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Welcome back to WURD, The Source, your source for information in the community. You've been listening to Move Your Body. There's a reason that Kayla D did that for us. Our number is 215-634-8065, toll free 866-361-0900. We're online at WURDradio.com. We're on social media, Facebook at FORWURD, Instagram, YouTube, and our Twitter handle is at onWURD, onWURD. Move your body. My name's Renee Chenault Fatan. I'm in this week, all this month, but on Mondays, the first of every week, hosting for Barbara Grant. What brought me to WURD for April was a documentary that I've been working on, Alzheimer's and Other Dementias in Communities of Color, because if you are African American, Hispanic, or Native American, you are twice as likely to have this disease. If you are a woman, you are more likely to have this disease. If you're a woman, you're more likely to be a caregiver for someone who has this disease. One of the reasons that we need to focus on why we're more at risk has to do with lifestyle issues. Exercise. Every doctor, every researcher I've talked to has said that exercise is so important in terms of helping us to control the sort of health factors that contribute to putting us more at risk. So health factors like diabetes, stroke, heart disease, obesity, all of these issues can be impacted through making lifestyle changes like eating right and like exercise. And when we talk exercise, it doesn't have to be taking a membership out in an expensive gym. It doesn't have to be doing all sorts of walking, the basic act of walking. The Surgeon General says 22 minutes a day of brisk walking can help reduce diabetes, heart disease. Nobel Prize winner Eric Kandel says 2 miles of walking releases something in the joints which has actually been shown to reduce dementia. Which is why we are talking to one of the participants of Girl Trek. Girl Trek is an organization which promotes self-care, sisterhood, and community building through walking. It was founded some 6 years ago by two friends seeking to promote fun, fitness, either by yourself or with your girlfriends, all as a way to prevent physical and mental health problems among Black women. Over 165,000 women worldwide, and I bet you this number is even larger, have put their names down in history as part of this growing Girl Trek movement. Joining me this morning in studio to talk about Girl Trek is Susie Page. Susie was born and raised in Philadelphia as a member of Girl Trek. She's had countless wonderful adventures organizing and participating in walks and hikes with women throughout our city and nation. And Susie, you are complete with Girl Trek team regalia here.
Superhero blue.
Yeah, I love it. It's so good to have you in studio.
Thank you.
I so appreciate it when I reached out. And it's so funny because I can't even remember how I found your name, but I went on Facebook. Facebook, I mean, we, you know, for all the negatives that can be associated, Facebook's wonderful in terms of connecting people. And I so appreciate you responding to my inquiry. But I read something about you, and I knew that you're involved in Girl Trek, and it's like, this is somebody I want to come in and talk.
Thank you so much.
So it's good to have you here on a Monday morning, and I'd like for you, I guess, just to start off talking a little bit about what Girl Trek is, because even though it's been in the news lately, and I think there are a number of folks who are aware, there's still not the awareness that there should be. So tell us what Girl Trek is about.
Well, like you said, we're a national sisterhood. We really are. And we promote self-care and sisterhood and community building through walking. And the founders, Morgan Dixon and Vanessa Garrison, they're two friends who knew each other, were in school together.
Where do they live? Where
now Morgan is now in Ghana.
Oh,
she's over in Ghana. Yes, staying in Ghana for a few months. But when she's in the States, she lives in North Jersey.
Right.
And the Girl Trek office and headquarters is in Washington, D.C., and that's where Vanessa is. So if you write us or you call us, that's where you reach them in Washington. But they just wanted to break some of the generational health concerns that plague them as Black women, like you mentioned. Particularly depression. Depression, obesity, things that they had watched take their lives early of aunts and mothers in their lives.
And these are young women, right?
Oh, yes.
I mean, yes.
When they began Girl Trek, they were in their late 20s.
I love it.
So they just began walking. And then they put out a call on Facebook and said, well, who would like to walk with us? And they weren't too sure anybody would respond. They had like 200 responses.
Right.
So this is something that we want to do,
Right.
but we need a safe place to do it, a framework to do it, a system that's going to be encouraging, yet accountable. At the time, Morgan worked for Teach for America, and she worked with middle school students.
Right.
And when she looked out over her students, particularly the girls, she said, if something's not done in the next 10 or 20 years, all these girls are going to have diabetes.
Yeah, yeah.
And so she began taking girls on the weekends on hikes, and that's where the name Girl Trek came from. She would trek with the girls.
Trek with the girls.
She trekked with the girls. So if parents were interested, if the cafeteria lady was interested, if the counselor was interested, she would take them. But then, of course, middle school students, high school students are not necessarily going to look at a lifestyle change or look at the health aspects and continue on if their mothers, their grandmothers, their aunts.
Gotcha.
We have to model for them.
Exactly.
And so that's
we
really,
do what we see.
Yes, we do what we see
around
and so
us.
we have to model for them. So the Word family is worldwide, and all they have to do is go on to girltrek.org. They click Join the Movement. And just like you mentioned, a trek is 30 minutes or more, because the 22 minutes, 30 minutes that the Surgeon General and American Heart Association recommend, that's what we recommend. But
which will go in no time at all if you're with friends and talking and caught up on things.
Oh, most definitely.
You know,
yes, it goes fast. And in fact, I've been in it so long now, if somebody says 30 minutes, we go, 30 minutes? Is that all we're going to do is 30 minutes? What do you mean we're done? We have to keep going. We have to get going. But we want to encourage everyone. So there are women listening who maybe can only do 30 minutes at this point. Because of
starting
illness,
off,
injury,
that can be a lot,
or whatever. And so they may have to break it up. They may have to do 15 minutes at lunch between classes at school, or when I worked at 30th Street, I worked a lot at lunchtime.
Right.
You know, wherever you, and that's the beauty of Girl Trek. We really promote the neighborhood walk.
Okay.
And everything is free. You just put on your shoes, sneakers, and you go out and walk. Solo walking or with others. Now, even if you're solo, the beauty of it is, well, you said the number is rising. I think when I looked last look, it's like 168,000.
Okay, yeah.
So you have
160-some
thousand other women that are rooting for you.
Yeah,
there's power in
that.
Yes. And so if once you go onto the website and you join, then you get the newsletters that they send out. If you're a Facebook person or a Twitter person, Instagram, you can follow along. And you not only get to see what's going on in Philadelphia, but what's going on across the country with Girl Trek. And many times when women have to go to another city for work, or they go visit relatives in another city, the first thing they do is...
You're kidding. Connect with the Girl Trek affiliate. And
most definitely.
Smart.
We had a Girl Trekker a year or so ago, was here in Philadelphia from Detroit.
Right.
And she said, okay, where y'all walking? And we met her down at the Love Statue, and we walked with her, and I found that she's an engineer at Ford.
Right.
And that's really where the sisterhood part comes in, too, because I have met so many women that I just don't know how else I would have met them if it hadn't been for Girl Trek.
Right.
And so I lead walks once a month out of my church, Nazarene Baptist in North Philadelphia. We call it Second Saturday Prayer Walk.
Right.
And that's like my walk. That's like my gift to Girl Trek.
Okay.
But we're all organizers.
Okay.
And as soon as you join, anyone can lead a walk.
You know, the fact that this was started from just the idea of one woman, Vanessa, one woman,
two friends.
Morgan, but I mean, that individually, these women didn't need an institution, didn't need a foundation, said this is something we can do one-on-one, and how it spread like
They
this.
started with no money.
Right.
No money. We have wonderful benefactors and funders, and when you sign up, you know, you let these, because everybody knows about stats and everything like that, you let the funders know that it's growing and it's making an impact on your life.
Right.
But, and that's the beauty.
And
everyone's organized.
Everyone's an organizer, and we're going to talk about Septima Clark, Septima Clark, the original organizer, in just a moment. But the fact that it's addressed at health. I was listening to a caller on Word earlier this morning. He was with the rapping professor. I think it was Mr. Charles, who said something effective. Why do all these things impact us? Why are all these negatives impacting us? And one of the responses really has to do with health. And the fact that you have this revolution, women who are taking control of our health. Because all of these things, whether it's diabetes, obesity, heart disease, stroke, it all springs from health.
Yes.
There is something just really powerful and inspirational And I think sometimes when we focus on our communities, there's a tendency to, well, let's look at what the deficit is, let's look at what the negative is. No, 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 no. There is so much powerful, there's so much resilient. You talk about your church and how you do, I mean, the church is long. We were talking about this earlier with Frederica Waugh from the Alzheimer's Association. The church has always had a role to play where our health and our well-being is concerned. But there's so much positive in our community. And this network that you're talking of women around the country, hearing about the sister who works at Ford, who is put in contact probably with the sister in Chicago who, you know, is at, you know, GM, I mean, whatever. But just there is enthusiasm and there's excitement around this that is empowering and it's infectious. When you, all right, tell me this. I know you do the walk once a month through your church, but Girl Trek itself, do you go out once a week? Do you go out every other day? How does it work?
Well, everyone's a solo trekker.
Okay.
And the solo trekking is the heart of the movement because you go when you can go, depending on your schedule.
So there's no rule. There's no, like, in order to be a member of Girl Trek, you have to meet once.
There's no Girl Trek police. So don't be afraid to take the pledge.
Which is important because that can be intimidating.
Right.
People will not do something if they think there are all these expectations that you know you can't meet.
And we've had that in the within Girl Trek.
Right.
Because I've had people say, well, you know, I haven't walked in so long, I'm going to have to sign up again.
Right.
No, you don't.
I love it.
Once a Girl Trekker, always a Girl Trekker. So solo trekking is the heart of the movement. We have a wonderful digital document called Harriet's Handbook. Of course, it's Harriet Tubman. Right. She walked for freedom, and not just her. You said we're going to talk about Septima Clark. All our ancestors, how they worked, how they walked for the freedoms that we enjoy. So as a tribute to them, then we're going to walk for our health. We're like taking it to the next step.
Gotcha.
They weren't able maybe to do all the things that we could do. The medical system some feel it's not that friendly to us now, but it really wasn't friendly to them then. And they had to do whatever they could for the freedoms that they enjoy. And so this freedom in our health is like the next step that we are taking. So Harriet's Handbook, you can download it, put it on your phone, print it out, and it's 1,000 ideas about where to go and where to walk. Now, if you want to walk with others, you can either host a walk and invite others to walk with you.
And that's done through the website.
Yes, it's done through the website. You just go on, you click walk, and you click host a walk, and it tells you how to put everything in there and give you a little boot camp video if you've never done hosted a walk before. If you're a Facebook person, you can come on to the Girl Trek Philadelphia Facebook page, and we post the events there.
Which is where I found.
So. Like this week, it's my walk, so my walk is on there, but then like first Saturday in May is several walks on there. So whenever women want to walk, they put the walks on there, and we just encourage everyone. And some will say, well, what if nobody comes? What if I post the walk and nobody comes? Well, we say, what difference does it make? You were going to walk.
Right, exactly, exactly.
And in all the times
no excuses.
In all the years I have hosted walks, because my mother, she's 96, and
what a blessing.
We live in a duplex. So where you going? Who's walking with you? I'm like, I don't know, Mom. You never know who's going to show up. You know, sometimes ladies respond and they can't make it. Never have I had a scheduled walk and I walked alone.
Wow.
Someone has always come.
That's powerful.
Yes.
Yeah. You know what? I want to ask you about Septima Clark, and I saw Vanessa and Morgan, their TED Talk, which just fired me up. So we want to talk about that, but we're going to go to break.
Okay.
You have been listening to Susie Page from Girl Trek here in Philadelphia. My name is Renee Chenault Fatah. I am sitting in on Mondays for Barbara Grant, who is taking the month off. Well, Barbara never takes the month off. Barbara's working very hard. She's working on a campaign. But I am filling in for Barbara on WURD 900 AM, 96.1 FM. We'd love to take your call. We want to sign you up for Girl Trek. It's 215-634-8065. Toll free 1-866-361-0900. We are back with more on Girl Trek and Susie Page in just a moment. Stay with us.
Brothers and sisters!
Don't miss The Source.
Weekdays, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m.
on WURD Radio.
WURDradio.com and the WURD Radio app.
Hi, this is John.
Hi, this is Juanita, owners of JD's Auto Body and Painting. We're located at 6300 Wayne Avenue, right there at the intersection of Wayne and Washington Lane.
We really like to thank all you WURD listeners for the support that you've given our business, and we really hope to see you in the future.
JD, tell them about our products and services we have.
We have a new state-of-the-art paint shop along with our body shop and detail shop. We can help you with the dents and scratches from the winter season.
Come to JD's Auto Body and Painting. Come on out and check us out. We're still honoring the WURD 10% discount. Give us a call, 215-848-5949. Again, 215-848-5949.
Thanks again for supporting our business. We really appreciate you.
See you at JD's Auto Body and Painting.
Councilman Alan Dom is building a brighter future for Philadelphia's children, fighting for more school funding, raising funds to support tech education, and personally donating to teach computer coding at Coded by Kids. Listen to Coded by Kids instructor Ashley and CEO Sylvester Mobley.
There are a lot of kids that will have a brighter future thanks to Alan Dom and his contributions to Coded by Kids.
Having Alan Dom make a commitment to transforming people's lives through technology has helped us. I can't thank Alan Dom enough.
Fundraising to teach computer coding, personally donating thousands. Alan Dom is fighting to give our children the opportunities they deserve and preparing them for success. Big ideas, big achievements. A better city for all of us. Vote Alan Dom, Democrat for City Council at large. Paid for by Alan Dom for City Council.
Register to vote by April 22nd. Keeping you informed. This is Word Radio. 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD Philadelphia. Streaming live at wordradio.com.
You're listening to The Source on Word Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
You're listening to WURD, 900 AM, 96.1 FM, The Source, your source for information in our community. We'd love for you to call in on this Monday. My name is Renee Chenault-Patah. I am filling in for Barbara Grant. Number is 215-634-8065. Toll free is 1-866-361-0900. We are online at WURDradio.com. We're also on social media, Facebook at FORWURD, Instagram, YouTube, FaceTube Live, Facebook Live. Yeah. Okay, you know what? It's a good thing my daughter's not listening, because she'd be like, Mom, please, you are so socially media not competent. That would be Facebook Live, and then YouTube, and thank you, Kayla D., who is the age of my daughter, so she gets it. And Twitter handle here is at ONWURD. When we were last speaking with you, I was with Susie Page, who is from Girl Trek, Philadelphia, talking about this wonderful revolution of women who are empowered to take control of our health. It was founded by T. Morgan Dixon and Vanessa Garrison as co-founders of Girl Trek. They started a revolution, and I'm so inspired by these young women, because they really have taken a page out of the civil rights movement to motivate all of us to get fit. Just to give a little bit of background, Dr. Martin Luther King called Septima Clark the architect of the civil rights movement. She truly was the teacher of some of our generation's most legendary activists, from Rosa Parks to Diane Nash to Fannie Lou Hamer, thousands more. Well, Septima Clark laid out a blueprint for change, and it's a blueprint that I think it's safe to say has withstood the test of time. So now, Morgan and Vanessa, co-founders of Girl Trek, are really, as we said, taking a page out of the handbook for the civil rights movement to take this to the next level. And I was watching their TED Talk, and it was so empowering, but sort of explain what Septima Clark did during the civil rights movement and how that's being applied to what women today are doing in Girl Trek to get us to take control of our health.
Right, absolutely. Well, she started the model called the Citizenship School, and so she and other teachers and trainers that worked under her, like you said, Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker, and many whose names, of course, we don't know.
Right, right.
They would come to a town or come to a city and ask the residents what they wanted to learn. So that's a difference than what you find in many like social programs or things where people come and say to you, here's what you should do, I have the solution. They will come and ask, what would you like to do? And so often, because this was into the 40s, the 50s, they wanted to read. Our ancestors wanted to learn how to write. They wanted to be able to go down and cash their own check. Some of the women wanted to be able to sew. Of course, many of them wanted to be able to vote. And because because of the poll taxes and things at that time, if you couldn't vote if you couldn't read. And so these were some of the things they would want to do, and so the teachers would go in and teach, and then teach others to teach, because once they were gone, they wanted it to continue to go. So then when the leaders that we revere and respect and love so much, particularly the men, the ministers that came in, when they would come in and wanted to register people to vote, to march, to work on the legislation, you already had a people that was prepared. You already had a people who knew where the Social Security office was, who knew who not just who was the president, who was their city council person, who was their school board member.
The people who make things work in a community.
Right, and this is what the citizenship schools did. And they would teach people how to take an active role in the community and, you know, the streets and, you know, the politics and everything. And so that's what Girl Trek does. We're not waiting for anyone to tell us what to do. We just lay the blueprint out. This is what the model is, you know, the Surgeon General, the American Heart Society, you know, that this activity 5 days a week is going to help you. And then how you form that, how you fashion that is up to you. So some women may only want to walk solo. We really encourage women to organize and lead walks and host walks, because we think that's important, because there again, you're not waiting, okay, well, if Susie's not hosting a walk, then we can't go there. No, we don't want that. But if that's not you right now, and you don't want to necessarily host a walk, you just go on the Facebook page, you go on the website, and you look to see where someone else is walking, and you go and you meet up with them.
Based on what the community needs. I mean, that's such a, I mean, it's, you know, you hear all the time about, well, outreach. Outreach is coming from outside, not knowing, as you said, what the community needs, instead saying, this is what we think you need. This is in reach. This is,
I like that.
Let's start with people who know best. And that could be applied, my God, Susie, across the board. Whether you're talking this, whether you're talking about bringing awareness for Alzheimer's, not going in saying this is what you need, but instead, okay, what is it that you need, and having that coming from the community working out. It calls to mind, in working on this documentary, I went out to Denver, and we're going to talk about Denver, Colorado in just a sec. But I went out to Denver and filmed the Alzheimer's Association. They have a promotores program, which is they have partnered with what are called promotores, which is Spanish word for like a promoter or volunteer. So they've partnered with women who are volunteers in the Hispanic community, who know the schools, who know the churches, who know the people, and they're going to them and saying, okay, this is the information, but you're the ones in the community who are trusted. You're the ones who know individually or, like, you know, block by block what people need. Let this come from you, and that way it's in keeping and in tune with, one, how you get trust and how you get people to buy in. And it sounds like, I mean, and it's, you know, in a way there's nothing new. I mean,
right, you're right, it's nothing new under the sun.
Clark and what she did with the citizenship schools, you know, we're smart if we look at what our elders have done and what has worked.
Most definitely. And like you were saying with your work, there's help for caregivers, but my situation is different from your situation in caring for whoever you care for.
Absolutely.
Because that's my mother, or that's your mother, or that's my father, or your father. So your feelings, no one can really say, I know how you feel. No one knows.
No one knows.
So your experience is your experience. And so one thing that happens with Girl Trek, when we walk in groups, it just never seems to fail that everybody ends up with a partner. We don't say take a partner, but everyone just ends up taking a partner. And many of the women that I initially walked with, of course, are from my church, and many of them I knew. Many of them I thought I knew well. It's something about walking.
I was going to say, let's talk a little bit. What happens when you're out there on that trail walking? I mean, it's a shame. You know, the journalist in me is like, oh, it's a shame these women aren't mic'd and you could film, because I bet there are some conversations.
You just begin to walk. You just begin to talk. Women just unload. We've had younger women, you know, walk with us, and sometimes they just want to cry because whatever's going on in their lives. Then often you hear good things and positive things about their children or grandchildren. children that you just wouldn't have known just seeing them in church, maybe sitting in class, maybe participating in a ministry. And then there's many women who I only knew in passing. I knew I didn't know them.
Right.
And because they said, oh, we want to walk. We want to come walk with y'all. And I would say, well, you know, you could just walk in your neighborhood. Why don't you get some other ladies together in your neighborhood? And some of them did that. And others, they would take the bus or they would drive.
They would make it.
This is where their sisterhood comes in.
Right.
And like you were saying with the depression and everything for the mind, we know that, you know, loneliness is like smoking a pack of cigarettes if you're chronically lonely, which, you know, is bad for your mind, bad for your brain. And it has just become just such a, the friendships that women have developed, whatever is going on in their lives, they seem to just pair up. We didn't say, oh, you need to do this, or you do. It just happens. It just flows, and it has just been wonderful. And then like where we are, the company that's next door to the church, they have not been very good landlords. So, you know, you try to get the city
in
businesses
being able to mobilize.
Right. And so like we adopted the wall, and we work with the city and make sure the graffiti stays off the wall, and you know, because we want to be proud when people come, you know, on our street and you know, into our church neighborhood. And this has happened all across the country, where women have taken even politicians on walks to show them, you know, why people aren't using transit or why certain areas flooded.
You see the neighborhood.
You see the neighborhood when you walk.
You're sharing something that is triggering something that, and circling back to the documentary, there is a clinical research project that was conceived by an African-American neuroscientist out at the Oregon Science and Health University. Her name is Raina Croft. She came up with a research project where she had looked at the research which showed that there was a way to hold off cognitive impairment if people walked, if they moved. So she came up with a research project where she got seniors who were starting to be in just the beginning of mild cognitive impairment to walk through their community. But they weren't just walking. They were walking through communities that when they were growing up there, because of redlining, because of segregation, we were forced to live in these communities. Well, now with the Silicon Revolution, we've basically been displaced from these communities, not allowed to be there anymore, but yet there are still historic markers. So as the seniors are walking through the communities, they're also recording history, and they're sharing history, and they're saying, well, this used to be the rec center where, you know, we went to, and this is that place. So it's a combination of sort of collecting history, commenting on the community, also walking, and improving cognition. And it triggered what you were saying about getting politicians and getting people to walk through and see what's happening in the community as a way to maybe we could do something similar, you know, where not only are you walking through the community, but you're also talking about, well, this used to be this spot and this used to be that. And it's been shown that that sort of conversation stimulates cognition and memory. So, I mean, there are just all sorts of benefits that, and it's also a great, in Oregon, this is a great way to preserve our history.
Absolutely.
Because I wasn't even aware that there was an African-American community in Portland, Oregon, but a way to preserve that history and share it and give value to it.
Walking's the wonder drug.
Walking is the wonder drug. And like you said, for mental health, if you're feeling depressed, to be outside on a nice day like today, which is why I appreciate you coming into the studio. We haven't been getting many of these nice days. You know, I grew up in Colorado. Right outside of Denver, Littleton, which nobody had heard of Littleton until the Columbine school shooting. But the wide open spaces, and you know how when you grow up in a place, you're like, I can't wait. I couldn't wait to get out of Denver. Couldn't wait to get to a big city. But as I've gotten older, I've sort of appreciated the beauty of Colorado. And when you mentioned that Girl Trek has their conference in Estes Park, which is just like this beautiful spot. This is like a lead-in for you to tell me about the conference that takes place Labor Day, because I think I may have to make my way and join Girl Trek, you know, for a number of reasons. But so tell me about the conference you have.
Well, it's called the Stress Protest, and it's been going on for a number of years.
Which is a much better way than saying conference. I'm sorry, let me get rid of conference.
The Stress Protest.
Stress Protest will get everybody to come.
Yeah, and it's held over Labor Day weekend. Of course, it's symbolic with labor, to rest from your labor. And my sister who got me involved in Girl Trek, she had been a few years before I had.
So this happens every year?
So far it's happening every year, and it's scheduled to happen again this year.
Okay.
And she kept saying, well, you should come, you should come. And I said, I will. And I finally went. And we were just standing back looking at the ladies. And she said, see, I told you. It's just almost indescribable.
Yeah.
The love, the camaraderie that you feel. And, of course, they have, I call it like assembly, or pep rally, every day. We have a lot of storytelling.
How long is it? How long
it's the weekend.
Okay.
It's the weekend.
So just
it's Labor Day weekend.
Okay.
Storytelling. Then all kind of classes. And they tell you, don't try to pack every minute of every day because you're coming here to relax,
to get rid of the
but
stress.
You can. But I mean, it's double Dutch and it's Zumba and it's yoga and it's prayer, and then of course the hikes. And the hikes just you got to put yourself in for a hike as soon as you hear about it because they can only take so many people. So it's beginner's hike, intermediate hike, advanced hike, and then of course being out there, as you know, at Estes Park, there's other things that you can do, the horseback riding and just
how many women?
You name it. When I went last year, I think it was about 400.
Really? Oh my God!
400.
Now, that was the other thing about growing up in Colorado. There weren't any black folks.
So we had some stories.
So to see 400 black women in Colorado,
we've had some stories about the National Park Service kind of not being as
not knowing how. I mean,
yes, but that's why we have to be there.
Absolutely,
and there have been instances
Susie.
Even here in the city. We do a 9-day prayer trek to follow the fruits of the Spirit in October, and we were at the Acme parking lot, and we had some signs, Girl Trek signs, and the first thing people want to know is, well, what are you protesting? And then there's something that we do around Thanksgiving every day. We call it the Black Family 5K, and we encourage families that at some time over the Thanksgiving weekend to gather the whole family and take a 5K
I
walk.
signed up for that, and we didn't go.
Well, that's
we all
okay.
said yes, but next year.
That's right.
But
that's
I did sign up.
And this was the particular year. My family, we always tend to gather somewhere for Thanksgiving where other relatives are. We were in Houston, and we were all there, and that's what people said, well, what are you protesting? We had a group out at Valley Forge Park, and someone said, oh, you're a nice group. Like, aren't we supposed to
be?
Right, or,
right.
Why shouldn't we be here?
Why shouldn't you be here?
Why shouldn't we be in these parks? Why shouldn't we be in these spaces? And Philadelphia, I tell people, everywhere, our system, our park system, you're paying for it, and there's lots of friends of the parks groups. I mean, even in my own neighborhood, I live near the Gresham Trail, which I didn't even know there was the Gresham Trail. There's 3 entrances to the Gresham Trail in walking distance of my house.
No excuse.
That I probably wouldn't have ever even explored if it wasn't for Girl Trek. And like we said, the neighborhood walk is important because it's easy, it's convenient. If you don't have a car, you don't have to drive. But a lot of times women will cross the city for experiences with other women. I had never been to the Hines Wildlife Refuge.
Oh, out near the airport.
I had never been there. I had never been to Bartram Gardens. And these are places like I would see you report on, or people, reporters would report from different places in the city, and I would say, oh, that looks nice, but maybe I should go there, but I had a motivation,
this
is the impetus to go there. And so we've had just all kind of experiences that have spun off from Girl Trek, all kind of friendships that have spun off from it. And yes, the health is what we're going for, but the spillover is just
let me
it's
ask
just
you
no
real
word
quick.
for it.
How did you decide on Estes Park, Colorado?
I don't know how.
Okay,
I don't know how. It was Morgan and Vanessa.
Well,
they've been trained like by the Sierra Club.
Okay.
And we have great partnerships with like REI. Okay. That's a good question. I'll have to find it out. I don't know how they settled on
Well, we'll
Estes
have
Park.
to bring them back because I know they've been in Word before. We'll have to call and explain that.
We'll have to ask them.
And I know my mom is listening right now. So, Mom, I hope you're prepared, but we're going to be heading to Estes Park Labor Day.
That'll be wonderful.
And I imagine there's also, it's generational. I imagine that you would have millennials as well as baby boomers and silent generation.
And we have a saying in Girl Trek, no lady left behind.
I love it.
And so when we're out walking in a group, we do something called a scoop and loop.
What's the scoop and loop?
So we never want anyone who maybe they figure, well, I can't come out because I can't keep up. If you're fast, you're real fast, say you're going down Broad Street or Germantown Avenue or whatever, you can go ahead. You go ahead, and then you'll stop at the light, or 4 or 5 blocks, or 3 or 4 blocks, and then you'll circle back. That way, you never have to break your stride. So you get your workout in at whatever pace you need. But the people who are slower, you constantly stay with them. One is the safety factor. We're never separated. And then we're all in together. with something called a victory bridge. So nobody ever feels like, I can't come out. Because women, mostly they say, I don't have time, or
because we
I can't
do
keep
everything,
up.
and we look out
up
for everyone other than ourselves.
Right.
So,
and so that's what we just encourage everyone to just take this as a gift to yourself. However you have to get it in. A good friend of mine now, she wasn't when we began because I didn't know her. We were talking, like you said, you walking, and she's young. She's maybe 40, and I said, you have 5 children? And she said, yes. And I said, and you always out here walking? Now the children walk with her, and her husband also walks, but not at first.
5 kids, bless her
and
heart.
I said, how you get away from them, and how you get out to come and walk? And she said, after she began walking, they say, Mom, aren't you going out with your group?
Mom, go on.
She said they be pushing her out the door, and now they've gone all over the city walking with her, the parks and all, and now her husband, he walks, and we partner with other groups in the city because we're not in competition, that walk and are all about fitness.
Because it's all about fitness.
Yes.
Susie, I so appreciate you coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And we're going to stay in touch.
Yes.
And I may even show up this weekend if I can.
Okay, that would be wonderful.
I'll get the information
but
for
ladies that like to travel, this is the 400th year of
which is Ghana, which is why I imagine that
Morgan is in Ghana,
Morgan is in
recognize Ghana. Our enslaved people.
Right.
But
is there a girl trek in
Ghana? I was
Ghana?
just going to say, you go on the website.
And what is the website? We're getting ready to go to break.
girltrek.org.
Oh,
that's where you can find everything.
Any easier than that. GIRLTREK.org for all the information.
Yes.
But
save your money because it's going to be a number of diaspora treks.
Oh my gosh,
Jamaica,
this
Ghana,
is the year. This is 400th anniversary. All right. Susie, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having
me. This has been fun. And now I'm motivated. I got to get out.
Feet to the pavement. See you on the street.
Feet to the pavement. See you on the street. You're listening to WURD, The Source, your source for information in our community. My name is Renee Chenault Fatah. This is WURD. 900 AM, 96.1 FM. Our phone numbers as we go to break, 215-634-8065 and toll free 1-866-361-0900. We're right back.
Reality Check. Reality Check. Hosted by Charles Ellison. Monday through Thursday, 4 p.m. till 7 p.m. Right here on Word Radio. 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD. Streaming live on wordradio.com.
Join Word Radio Friday, April 12th for a pre-celebration of the life and legacy of phenomenal athlete, veteran, and civil rights activist Jackie Robinson at Brown ShopRite, 52nd and Jefferson Streets, beginning at 10 a.m. We're hosting a pre-Jackie Robinson Day celebration featuring a live broadcast with guests who will provide commentary on Jackie Robinson. Come out and enjoy popcorn, hot dogs, and other refreshments. And come early. The first 42 people to start or renew their 4WORD membership at this event will receive a discounted rate of just $80. The Jackie Robinson celebration is presented by Brown ShopRite, Dietz & Watson, Amoroso's, Hers, and Canada Dry, and sponsored by Moravia Health.
WordRadio.com.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1,
Word Radio congratulates the Philadelphia winner of our Level Up contest, Martine Augustin.
Level Up.
Despite adversity early on, Martine's work ethic, compassion for people, and incredible decision-making has made her a leader in her community and an embodiment of determination. Martine is currently a criminal justice major in her junior year at Hampton University. She plans to pursue her law degree so that she can better serve her community someday as a Supreme Court justice. At just 20 years old, she has been a volunteer at Say Yes to Education, the Kwanzaa Cooperative, Ngoma Tribute to the Drum, Asada Sankofa Sisterhood, and she founded her own organization, AOA, Ambition Overcomes Adversity, where she mentors young people to overcome any obstacles they may face. Through focus, a loving and supportive community, and sheer will, Martine Augustin has certainly leveled up.
Level Up.
You're listening to The Source
on Word Radio.
96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Welcome back to WURD 900 AM, 96.1 FM, the source, your source for information in our community. We'd love for you to call in. Any questions you have about Alzheimer's and other dementias in communities of color, our number is 215-634-8065. Our toll-free number is 1-866-361-0900. We're online at WURDradio.com, and we're on social media. Right now we're on Facebook Live, which I think I called FaceTube in the last blog. Stop laughing at me, Kayla. But we're at Facebook at FORWURD, Instagram, YouTube, and our Twitter handle is at onWURD, ONWURD. I have, for I guess the past year and a half now, been working on a documentary on Alzheimer's and dementia in communities of color. And I chose the topic because in doing research, I learned that if you're African American, Hispanic, or Native American, you're twice as likely to have this disease. And it was interesting, I think I mentioned it with our last guest, Susie Page, who's from Girl Trek, that I had been listening this morning to the rapping professor, and he had a call in from Mr. Charles, who raised the question of why is it that we're always the ones impacted by these diseases, whether it's Alzheimer's, whether it's cancer, stroke, heart attack. Across the board, it seems as if African Americans are disproportionately impacted. And he went on to talk about diet. It's not an issue of because we are black, this is impacting us. It's because of a number of factors. It's lifestyle issues, it's social determinants of health, it's risk factors, certain diseases, and certainly in the case of Alzheimer's, put us at risk for having the disease. In other words, what I'm saying is there has been a link shown in research between diabetes, stroke, obesity. All of these conditions increase your chance for having Alzheimer's. And these conditions, diabetes, stroke, heart disease, obesity, are more prevalent in communities of color. And it ties in with diet, it ties in with lifestyle, it ties in with stress. Believe it or not, it ties in with, there's research that shows that levels of education puts you at increased risk for Alzheimer's disease. In other words, less formal education, less quality education increases the risk for Alzheimer's disease. Sleep deprivation. Who doesn't suffer from issues of sleep? Well, research shows there's a correlation between lack of sleep and increasing your risk for Alzheimer's disease. In doing this documentary, I all the time run into people who want to tell their own stories and would love to, through film, through video, do so. When I decided to go down this road a year and a half ago, I approached someone in the community who has been making film and making documentary for decades. I'm talking about Bob Lott. He was really the first person who I reached out to in terms of sort of the production aspect of how you go about telling a story. And Bob perhaps will call in so he can share his experiences. But it's interesting because, like I said, Bob has done so much in our community in terms of storytelling. And I was online just the other day reading about Cliveden, which is one of the historic house mansions in Germantown, and was interested because I had heard that there was going to be a book reading taking place there this coming Friday, February. I guess that must be the, is that the my dates, I think that's the 12th. Anyway, this coming Friday from 7 to 9 at Cliveden, there's a book reading on a book about, it's called Slavery in the North, Forgetting History and Recovering Memory. It's written by Professor Mark Howard Ross. His book traces 250 years of slavery in the North. You know, we always think of slavery as being something that happened in the South, but of course we know, given the discovery that was made as to the first White House here in Philadelphia and the fact that slaves were held by George Washington, this is down near Independence Mall, that slavery in the North was very much an issue. So a professor from, I believe he's from Bryn Mawr, Professor Mark Howard Ross, has written a book on slavery in the North, and there's going to be a book reading at Clifton, and I know this is a roundabout way of explaining Clifton, but Bob Lott did a documentary several years ago, a brief, maybe a documentary is too formal a word for it, but a pretty extensive video on Clifton and Clifton's history. And I just in reading about Clifton and went online and saw where Bob had done the video for that. Well, Bob helped me in like the beginning, I guess the beginning stages when I was working on the documentary in terms of doing some filming, and I was very appreciative for that. And Bob, if you're out there, you're welcome to call in and tell us about how you got into this line of work, because I know that's not how you started. But again, we're focusing on Alzheimer's and dementia in communities of color. And last week I was joined by Carol Amos, who was a caregiver for her mom for a number of years. And she had written a book, which is really sort of a Bible. It's a caregiver support guide. And Carol was here with me when we received a call from a dear woman, Pernell, who wanted to know about the services that were available in her area to help. And when I talk about services, I'm really talking about financing. Her mom, she had been caring for her mom for a number of years. They had sold her mom's house that provided a source of income to help with caregiving. But of course, her mom has been dealing with this for years, so those funds had dried up, and Pernell was wondering what services were available. And Carol, who, as I said, was with me last week, did a little bit of digging when we left and sent me some information saying basically the first place for anybody to start, if you're looking for what sorts of reimbursements are out there to help you, because this is such an onerous burden financially, taking care of someone else. But the first place to start is the Department of Aging. You can go to their website. It's www.aging.pa.gov. You go to that site. You are then directed to what they call, and I went on the site just to sort of play around with it a little bit. It will send you to what's called an agency locator. And what that means is, of course, this site is for people who live throughout the state. So you have to figure out what services are available in your community. This agency locator is based county by county. It will ask you what county you live in. So let's say you're Philadelphia County. Well, the agency locator, you put in Philadelphia County, and up pops the Philadelphia Corporation of Aging. That's the department that would help you figure out what sorts of reimbursements are available for you if you're a caregiver for someone and you're looking for financial assistance. Well, they require you to fill out the application online, as you can imagine. And in looking at this site, in general, and I'm really going to generalize here because it's going to depend on, what your particular situation is. But in general, the law says that in order to receive compensation, no surprise here, both the caregiver and the care receiver, they have to be residents of Pennsylvania. And then after that's established, you have to participate in what they call a needs assessment. And that, again, would be, if you're from Philadelphia County, that would be conducted by the Philadelphia Corporation on Aging. And the caregiver, again, getting back to what requirements are, would have to be an adult who is primarily responsible for providing care on a regular basis. And then once that's established, then you have to meet what are considered eligibility categories. And again, that's going to depend. I'm going to give you just one example because I think they had about 4 or 5 different categories. But let's just look at Category 1. Category 1 says that the caregiver has to be 18 years or older. No surprise there. The care receiver, now this is the person who you are taking care of. They're an individual 60 or older with functional deficits. Now, even though they don't say it, functional deficit, we're talking dementia, we're talking Alzheimer's here. Now, the regs, as I looked at it, the law, the regulations that were set forth on this website, didn't really set forth a financial eligibility requirement for the caregiver support program, but and here's sort of, there's always a but, right? The amount of the reimbursement is based on your income and the household size of the care receiver. So in other words, how many people are in the home, as well as what the income is. So, and again, the numbers, in fact, you know what, it would probably make sense at some point to bring in somebody from the Corporation of Aging to sort of break this down. But let's just take an example if you're trying to figure out what sort of eligibility requirement might exist for you. All right. Of course, they talk about the federal poverty level. Well, as they set it forth here, the federal poverty level for a couple under this Category 1, let's say $16,910. If that's the federal poverty level, if your income is less than $33,000, you would be entitled to 100% reimbursement for costs. If your income is between $33,000 and $64,000, you would get between 100% all the way down to 10%. This is confusing because in a way it makes it sound like it's based on the income of the person receiving care. Because if you look at the regs before that, it says both the caregiver and the care receiver must be a resident of Pennsylvania, and going back to what they said about participating, both of them, in a needs assessment. So I guess the best way to probably wrap this up would be to bring in somebody in the weeks to come from either the Department of Aging or Philadelphia Corporation of Aging to sort of walk us through what's available. Because as the push is to get more and more people to stay in their homes where this disease is concerned, it only behooves the government, state, federal, and going back to even local, to provide some sort of assistance. And there is assistance out there, but provide some sort of assistance to help people navigate these waters. We'd love to hear from you. The number is 215-634-8065. The toll-free number is 1-866-361-0900. My name is Renee Chenault Fatah. You're listening to WORD, 900 AM, 96.1 FM. I'm guest hosting on Mondays in April for Barbara Grant, and we are right back.
In celebration of the 20th anniversary of the Drexel University Jazz Extravaganza, the Drexel University Jazz Orchestra will once again share the stage with the Howard University Jazz Ensemble. The Howard Jazz Ensemble, directed by Fred Irby III, and the Drexel Jazz Orchestra, directed by Brent White, will perform compositions by Benny Golson, Herbie Hancock, Randy Weston, Lou Donaldson, and other masters of the jazz tradition. Special guest artist for the evening will be Dr. George L. Starks Jr., former director of the Drexel University Jazz Orchestra and founder of the annual Jazz Extravaganza, and Professor Joseph Jennings, former director of the Spelman College Jazz Ensemble. The concert will take place on Friday, April 12th at 7 p.m. in the Mandel Theater, 33rd and Chestnut Streets on the Drexel University campus. The event is free and open to the public. For more information, please call 215-895-2451.
Did you know that smoking a hookah for 1 hour is equivalent to smoking 10 cigarettes? Or that a single black, Dutch, or Swisher cigarillo has 3 times as much tobacco as a cigarette? Even the leaf wrap is full of tobacco and harmful to your health. Whether it's from a hookah, cigar, cigarillo, or cigarette, where there's smoke, there's danger. To learn more and for help quitting today, visit smokefreephilly.org/danger.
Be heard. Want another way to join the conversation?
Follow us on social media
using the hashtag onWORD.
Be heard.
Stay connected to WORD Radio.
Independent Black Media.
RG Electrical Inspections provides electrical inspections for realtors, licensed electricians, and homeowners. RG is a certified plans examiner and licensed underwriter providing assistance for PICO outages. RG is also listed on PICO's website. RG Electrical Inspections is a licensed and insured underwriter serving Philadelphia and surrounding areas. Call if you have plans to review today, 267-902-1655.
When you went car shopping, you meant business. You aced vehicle history searches and test drives. You out-salesmaned the salesman. Now you've got your wheels. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll have the info you need to get more for your future. Go to aceyourretirement.org, because when it comes to speeding past financial challenges, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
You're listening to The Source
on WORD Radio,
96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Reprimand a grown up.
Welcome back to WURD 900 AM, 96.1 FM. My name's Renee Chenault Fatah. You're listening to The Source, your source for information in our community. And I am guest hosting for Barbara Grant this month of April on Mondays. You can call in at 215-634-8065. Toll free, the number is 1-866-361-0900. In the last segment, I was talking about just how expensive, and of course if you're a caregiver or someone with this disease, you don't need to be told, but the economic burden that's associated with Alzheimer's and dementia, just in terms of caregiving costs. I'm going to give you just a few statistics here. Estimate is that caregivers spend an average, and this was information that Carol Amos, who was guest hosting with me last week, shared, but caregivers spend on average $6,954 a year. That's an out-of-pocket cost. That's nearly 20% of the average income. These out-of-pocket costs are related to the cost of caregiving. These numbers come from a new AARP study called Family Caregiving and Out-of-Pocket Cost. Now, this was done in 2016, so you can only imagine that as high as that number is of $6,954 a year, it's gone up now that we're in the first quarter of 2019. And to break it down by groups, Hispanic, Latino, and low-income family caregivers actually spend even more than that number, an average of 44% of their total annual income. That's almost half of annual income spent on out-of-pocket caregiving costs. Now, that's on top of all the other financial strains that many caregivers face, such as needing to cut back on work hours or taking unpaid leave, the cost of absenteeism, which means, calling out, or presenteeism, which means you're just not as present at your job because you're taking care of someone else. It's a huge financial cost. Nancy Lamond, who is the Chief Advocacy and Engagement Officer at ARP, says, and I'm quoting here, the strain can be enormous and may put many people, talking about caregivers, their financial and even their retirement security at risk. Her answer to this, and I think there's wisdom in this suggestion, is that there should be a push by all of us to see past the Bipartisan Credit for Caring Act. Now, this act, and I'm not familiar with it, I'm going to maybe have to do a little bit of research and digging, but the Credit for Caring Act, if passed, would provide a federal tax credit of up to $3,000 and would give some sorely needed financial relief to eligible family caregivers. So that's certainly a piece of legislation in Congress that we should all get behind. Now, I'm going to make a detour just for a quick second. I mentioned Congress. Tomorrow, and this is something that I can talk about next Monday when I'm back with you, but tomorrow I'm going to be in Washington, D.C., meeting in the afternoon with Congressman Elijah Cummings from Maryland. Congressman Cummings has been a real supporter of Alzheimer's funding and research. He and Congresswoman Maxine Waters were behind the passage of the Alzheimer's stamp that was issued, I guess, probably been about a year or so ago. But stamps like that go a long way towards raising funds for research, in this case for Alzheimer's disease. But I'm going to be meeting with Congressman Cummings about ways in which we can bring awareness to this disease. But certainly the cost that's associated and passage of something like the Credit for Caring Act, $3,000 tax credit could certainly be a benefit. Going back to these numbers that were provided by ARP, the burden that falls on African American family caregivers. The estimates from ARP say that $6,616 a year of out-of-pocket costs coming out of the pockets of African American families for caregiving associated with taking care of a loved one who has this disease. That's 34% of a person's income. It's huge. By comparison, white family caregivers spend about $6,964, or 14% of their income. Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders spend $2,935, or 9% of their income. Now, no surprise here, but the group that seems to be hit hardest would be long-distance family caregivers, and it's not surprising that they would be the ones who would perhaps have to shoulder the biggest expense. Their highest out-of-pocket cost hits at, listen to this, my goodness, $11,923 a year in out-of-pocket costs taking care of someone with this disease. So clearly, whether you're talking about $6,900 a year coming out of your pocket or $11,923 coming out of your pocket, this means that family caregivers are having to dip into their savings, they're cutting back on personal spending, they're saving less for retirement, maybe wiping out their retirement accounts. More than half of all caregivers in this country, in addition to those costs, also report work-related strain and stress. So this is an issue that we're going to be looking at in the weeks to come, how we can put pressure on our city, state, and federal government representatives to, as much as possible, help families, individuals cope with the economic cost associated with this disease that has been called, and rightfully so, a public health crisis. I started off the morning with the Alzheimer's Association's Associate Director for Diversity and Inclusion, Frederica Waugh, who had so much important information. And that really is sort of how I want to end things today. The Alzheimer's Association, they provide so much information, and really for anyone who is embarking on this journey, because it is a journey, people with Alzheimer's and dementia, it's a disease that can last for years, decades. One of the families that I'm interviewing in my documentary, filming their journey, the father has had Alzheimer's for 16 years. The mother was just diagnosed 3 years ago. So this is a disease that that can be with us for a long time. So the best place to start to get information is the Alzheimer's Association. And I want to share with you some of the tips that they offer on their website to give people information on what to look for, because that's one of the questions when people hear that I've been working on this documentary. They're like, well, you know, I'm taking care, or I live with my mom or my dad or my spouse, and I'm wondering, what should I be looking out for in terms of signs and symptoms? And the Alzheimer's Association, they have on their website, or if you go to their helpline, which really I think is a perfect place to start. I'm going to give you that number again. It's 1-800-272-3900. That's the 1-800. It's manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But their hotline, they can answer a lot of your questions. But they do provide some sort of guidepost. And I guess the first symptom that you would want to look for would be memory loss. You know, one of the most common signs of Alzheimer's disease, especially when we're talking the early stages, is, well, forgetting recently learned information. Other signs of memory loss would be forgetting important dates or events, or maybe asking for the same information over and over, or increasingly needing to rely on memory aids like a reminder note or an electronic device. Now, you hear that, and if you're like me, you're like, oh, wait a sec, I forgot this, or I don't remember that. Well, there's something called typical age-related memory loss, which is a normal part of aging. That's not what we're talking about in terms of one of these symptoms to look for. You know, simply forgetting somebody's name or forgetting an appointment, but then remembering later. That is normal age-related memory loss. The second symptom that the Alzheimer's Association suggests that you take a look at is if a person, somebody you know, your loved one, has challenges in either planning or solving problems. What that means is, what has been seen is that some people experience like a change in their ability to develop or follow a plan, or maybe all of a sudden they have problems working with numbers. They've always been great doing the checkbook and taking care of monthly bills, and then all of a sudden they can't seem to do that, and the bills start piling up. That's one of the common symptoms when I've been interviewing people, caregivers, and asking them what was some of the first things they started to see with their loved ones is like people who were on top of paying the bills every month all of a sudden aren't paying them. And it's not a financial issue. It's a matter of, they have the money to pay the bills. It's that somehow they just don't get done and they start to stack up. Or let's say you love baking, you love cooking, and all of a sudden you can't follow a recipe and having to do the measurements. It's just not making sense. That's a symptom that says that you need to get that person, or if it's yourself who's experiencing this, you want to go to your primary care physician. And Frederica Waugh from the Alzheimer's Association made the wonderful point that every wellness visit after age 65 covered by Medicare should include your primary care physician doing some sort of cognitive testing. And if that doesn't happen, if your doctor doesn't do that, then we have to take the responsibility to ask the doctor for him or her to do that. Because those sorts of things, if they're detected early, you would then go to a specialist, and there are things that can be done. But again, the first step is to get that primary care physician to do that cognitive, that mini cognitive test. Now, after saying that if a person has, problems with numbers or keeping track of the bills, that it's a concern. What's not a concern, and what is part of just like getting older, is maybe making an occasional error with balancing your checkbook. It's always so it's tricky going through a list of symptoms, because as soon as you say something, a person will be like, well, wait, I have trouble with that. And no, there is very much a difference between age-related memory loss and what's a sign that maybe there could be a cognitive deficit problem. So a typical age-related change with numbers would be, like I said, making that mistake when balancing and who balances their checkbook anymore? But anyway, if you do and you find you're making an occasional mistake, that's not reason for concern. Another tip that's put out by the Alzheimer's Association that I thought was really helpful when I saw this is if a person has difficulty completing familiar tasks at home or at work or just like in their leisure time, people with Alzheimer's often find it hard to complete just daily basic tasks, day-to-day tasks, maybe having trouble driving to a familiar location, managing the budget at work, maybe remembering the rules of a game that they've been playing for years and years and years. I know I was talking, in fact, I mentioned Congressman Elijah Cummings. I was talking to him, and he was saying that one of his neighbors, who for years had, he was a professor at Morgan University and had, driven himself to work and drove himself home, and that was his routine, and he had lived there for 30 years. And one day, he got halfway home and could not remember what street to turn on next. He was completely lost to the point where he actually had to pull over and ask someone to let him follow them to his address. He had his address written down to follow him to get home. That's a signal that there's a problem. Difficulty completing familiar tasks at homes. Okay, that's the problem. Here's the sort of the balance to that, as in what's just a typical age-related change. Let's say you occasionally need help, like using the setting on a microwave or maybe recording a TV show. I mean, I still, to this day, have trouble with that. Well, those sorts of things, again, that's just a part of the normal aging process versus this is a symptom of a dementia or an Alzheimer's that deserves attention from the doctor. The final tip that I'm going to give you, and the Alzheimer's Association, they're wonderful about this. They have about 10 tips listed on their website. I'm just going to end with this fourth one because, again, I think it's another one, just like the one about having trouble completing familiar tasks. This one is important. Confusion with time or place. People with Alzheimer's can lose track of dates, seasons, the passage of time. They may have trouble understanding something if it's not happening right in the here and now. Sometimes they could forget where they are or how they got there, which is the example I gave about the professor driving home from university. Those are the types of confusions that signal that a person needs to be seen by their doctor versus typical age-related change of getting confused about the day of the week and then figuring it out later. I started to say today was Tuesday when clearly it's Monday. Not a concern. But if you can't bounce back from that, if you can't figure that out, you know, without somebody calling it to your attention, it is something that you want to take a look at. But again, the Alzheimer's Association, there's so much information out there, and over the next 3 Mondays from 10 to 1, I am going to be here with my dear friend, we've become buddies now, Kayla J., talking to you about Alzheimer's and other dementias in communities of color, how it's related to where we live, how it's related to managing our chronic conditions like diabetes and obesity and hypertension. These are all issues that impact our health, our wellness, our communities, and I'm looking forward to sharing the information with you. But for the past 3 hours, you've been listening to me here at WURD AM 996.1 FM. This is The Source, which always is your source for information in our community. My name is Renee Chanel Fatah, and it has been my honor to fill in for Barbara Grant, who is off this month of May. Enjoy the rest of your day. You heard Susie Page from Girl Trek say, get out there and move it. Let's walk. Let's exercise. We can control what's happening with our health. Thanks so much for listening. Enjoy the day. I look forward to being back with you next Monday. Take care.
Young and woke. Fridays on Wake Up with Word. Hosted by the Rapping Professor, Dr. Aaron Smith. 7 a.m. till 10 a.m. right here on Word Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
At Dietz & Watson, we've spent over 75 years focusing on the details. This can be traced back to our founder, Gottlieb Dietz, who learned how to make Franks and sausages the right way in Germany. Today, each one of our delicious offerings is meticulously crafted using perfected details. Because if it isn't good enough for our family, it isn't good enough for yours. To us, the details make all the difference.